Welcome back, my friend. Before we start the video, I really need your support. The channel is going through a tough time, and your help means everything. Let's try to reach 1,000 likes and 1,000 comments. If everyone watching leaves just one like and one comment, we can easily make it happen. Don't forget to subscribe as well. And now, let's get started. I still feel a chill when I think about the first time I saw the old roadside inn. I remember standing in the gravel lot, looking at the weathered wooden sign that creaked in the wind. The main building looked solid but worn, with faded shutters and a low-pitched roof. It was late afternoon and the sun was dropping behind the hills, casting long shadows across the front porch. I carried my single duffel bag and stepped inside, unaware of what waited for me once darkness fell. I walked into a narrow lobby with a simple desk and a single lamp. The desk clerk was an older man with a stiff posture. He looked at me without much emotion. He didn't speak much beyond the usual check-in questions. He gave me a room key on a heavy metal ring and pointed me toward the stairs at the back of the lobby. I noticed the old wallpaper peeling at the corners, and the floor squeaked under my shoes. The air smelled stale, like old furniture and dust. I felt an itch at the back of my neck but shrugged it off. My room was on the second floor at the end of a short hallway. There were only 3 other doors in that hallway. It was quiet when I arrived, with no sounds of conversation or footsteps. The door to my room had a dull brass knob and a few scratches near the edges. I opened it and stepped inside. The room was cramped, with a single bed, a small wooden dresser, and a single window that looked out over the empty lot. There was an antique mirror next to the bed and a narrow closet on the left. The walls had the same peeling wallpaper I saw downstairs. I unpacked my duffel, pulled out a t-shirt, and changed. My plan was to rest for the night, then continue my trip the next morning. I wasn't in the mood to explore, but I went downstairs to see if there was any food or a vending machine. I found a small lounge area with old chairs and a table. There was a water dispenser and an ancient-looking soda machine. I grabbed a soda and returned to my room. On my way back, I noticed the air in the hallway felt colder than it had earlier. I shivered, but the temperature outside was dropping too, so I figured it was normal. That first night I fell asleep around 10. I woke up sometime after midnight to the sound of footsteps on the floor outside my door. They sounded light and slow, like someone pacing. At first I thought it was another guest, but the steps were too deliberate, too drawn out. I held my breath and listened. The steps moved closer, then paused right at my door. My heart pounded. I thought about calling out, but I kept quiet. I heard a faint whisper, but I couldn't make out any words. It was like breath passing through teeth, too soft and urgent to interpret. I finally got out of bed and walked to the door. My hands felt clammy, and my legs were tense. I opened the door quickly, but the hallway was empty. The only light came from a single overhead bulb near the stairwell. I looked both ways. Nothing. The footsteps were gone. I waited for a minute, scanning the area, but nobody appeared. I walked back inside, shut the door, and locked it. I stood there in the dark, listening for anything else. I only heard the faint hum of the inn's heating system. Eventually, I crawled back into bed, although it took me a while to calm down. The next morning, I got up and headed straight for the bathroom down the hall. After I showered, I returned to my room and noticed a thin crack in the wood of my door, near the base. The wood was splintered in a small area, like it had been struck with something. I leaned down, looking at it more closely. A subtle draft of cold air seeped through. It felt like a light, steady breath of icy wind. I touched the door, and it felt colder around the crack. I ran my finger along the edge, and a few small splinters came loose. The damage looked new. I went downstairs for a quick breakfast. There was a small dining area with a couple of tables and a self-serve station with cereal and coffee. I grabbed a bowl of cereal, poured coffee into a styrofoam cup, and sat alone. I didn't see anyone else around except the same desk clerk, who was now wiping the counters. I wanted to ask if he'd heard anything during the night, but I got a bad feeling about bringing it up. He barely acknowledged me anyway. I finished my breakfast and walked outside to stretch my legs. The day was calm. I considered leaving right then, but something made me stay. I had some reason to rest before continuing my trip. I told myself it was just one more night. The afternoon passed uneventfully. I spent some time in the lounge area looking through old magazines, then took a walk around the property. The building was larger than I had realized, with a storage shed in the back and a gravel path leading to a few overgrown bushes. I didn't see any other cars around, so I assumed business was slow. That night I climbed the stairs with a sense of dread. I locked my door and even wedged a chair under the knob, not sure if it would do any good. The crack at the base of the door still let in a thin line of cold air, so I draped a towel over that spot. I turned off the lights, lay in bed, and stared at the ceiling. My mind kept replaying the sound of footsteps from the night before. Sleep came late. I woke up to the same sound, but it was louder this time. The pacing was more insistent, back and forth, right in front of my door. I froze under the blankets. My arms felt heavy and my heartbeat was so loud it throbbed in my ears. A sudden knock rattled the door. It wasn't a casual knock. It was sharp and angry. I sat up, sweat rolling down my face. Then silence. I waited. I looked around for my phone. I grabbed it from the nightstand and checked the time. 3:17 a.m. My throat felt dry, so I swallowed hard and tried to think. I didn't call anyone. I felt stupid for even considering the police, but part of me wanted to. I got out of bed and approached the door. My legs felt shaky and my stomach was tight with anxiety. I put my ear against the wood. I heard a faint whispering again. It sounded like someone breathing words that never formed. I felt the cold air coming through that tiny crack. It brushed against my ankles like an icy draft. I wanted to fling the door open and confront whoever was there, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. A big part of me believed I might find nothing at all, just like the night before. Eventually, I backed away and returned to bed, but I stayed awake until dawn. The next morning, I noticed the crack in the door had grown longer. It went up about 6 inches from the base now, a jagged line in the wood. The area around it looked chipped, like something was pushing from the other side. I stood there, my heart racing, wondering if I was losing my mind. My hands trembled as I touched the crack. The cold air felt stronger, more constant, almost like a tiny breeze. I got dressed and went downstairs. I decided I had to say something. I approached the clerk, who was sitting on a stool behind the desk, flipping through a small notebook. "Hey, excuse me," I said. "Is there a chance someone's been walking around at night? I heard footsteps. Also, my door is damaged." He gave me a blank stare. He flipped the notebook shut. "No one else is staying on your floor," he said. "I haven't heard anything." He didn't even look curious. I pressed him further. "Well, there are these knocking sounds at night, and whispering. Are you sure nobody else is around?" He shrugged. "No one's complained before." I felt my anger rising. "Could you come up and take a look at the door?" He sighed. "I'll be up later. I'm busy right now." I walked away, frustrated. I wondered if he was hiding something. Maybe the place had a reputation for weird things and he preferred not to discuss it. I sat in the lounge again, but I couldn't focus on anything. I kept staring at the walls, thinking about the footsteps and that cracked door. Every time I imagined the whisper, I felt my skin crawl. I couldn't decide if I was going insane. It bothered me that no one else seemed to notice anything. By the time evening came, I was on edge. I paced around the lobby, waiting to see if the clerk would follow me upstairs. He never did. I thought about leaving right away, but I worried about driving so late at night, feeling this rattled. I decided to endure one more night. I went to my room, locked the door and pushed the dresser in front of it. I left the lights on. I was determined to stay awake and catch whoever was out there. Around midnight, the temperature dropped again, and I saw my breath when I exhaled. The room felt colder than before. The heater must have been struggling, or maybe something else was responsible. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door. The towel and dresser were in place, but the cold air still seeped through. My teeth started chattering. I wrapped a blanket around me and waited. Sometime around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps again, slow and heavy, like boots on the floor. They stopped in front of my door, and I felt a wave of dread. My pulse pounded in my head. I stood up, gripping the blanket, and stepped closer. I heard the whisper again, right near the crack. It was a soft, constant hiss, rising and falling. I moved the dresser aside just enough to get a clear view of the crack. I leaned down. The cold was intense, like someone was blowing winter air directly at me. My stomach lurched and I almost lost my nerve. But I held still, listening. The whisper wasn't words, but it felt like it was trying to speak. Suddenly the door rattled as if someone yanked the knob. The hair on my arm stood up. I stumbled back and nearly tripped over the dresser. My heart hammered in my chest. The rattling stopped, and the footsteps retreated down the hallway. I heard them fade into silence. I waited a moment, then moved the dresser again and yanked the door open. The hallway light flickered slightly, but it stayed on. I stepped out, scanning left and right. No one was there. The air felt freezing and I noticed goosebumps on my arms. I walked up and down the hallway, checking the other doors. They looked locked and undisturbed. I even tried one door handle, but it wouldn't budge. My footsteps echoed on the wooden floor, but no other sounds accompanied me. After a minute, I went back to my room and shoved the dresser in place. I stayed up the rest of the night, flipping through channels on the old TV, but nothing took my mind off that whisper. I felt sweaty despite the cold. When morning came, I was exhausted. My eyes stung and I felt short-tempered. I stood in front of the door again, examining the crack. It was wider now, maybe an inch across at the widest point, and it branched out in two directions. I could see a sliver of the hallway through it if I leaned down. A wave of cold air hit my face. My breath caught in my throat. I had the urge to reach through the crack, but I stopped myself. Something about that gap made me feel vulnerable. It felt like something was on the other side watching me. I realized I'd been staring into that crack for too long. I packed my things, planning to check out and never return. I needed to get away from that inn. I carried my bag downstairs and slammed it on the front desk. The clerk was there, writing in his notebook again. I told him I was leaving. He nodded without surprise. He didn't say anything about my door or the noises. He simply took the key and placed it on a hook behind him. As I stepped outside, the morning air felt brisk, but it wasn't as cold as my room had been the night before. I placed my bag in the trunk of my car and got behind the wheel. My hands were shaking, and I had to steady my breathing before starting the engine. I glanced up at the second-floor window of my room. The curtain was drawn, but I imagined something standing there, watching me. I felt foolish for even thinking that way, yet I couldn't shake the image from my mind. I turned the key and the engine sputtered to life. My heart rate gradually slowed as I pulled out of the lot. The gravel crunched under the tires. I left that old inn behind me, trying not to look back in the rearview mirror. But the thought of that crack in the door followed me. The memory of the cold air and the whispering footsteps stayed in my mind. Now, when I think about it, I still feel that tension in my chest. I don't have a logical explanation for what happened in that inn. I don't know if it was a trick of my imagination or something else. All I know is that I heard footsteps that shouldn't have been there, and I felt a presence that I couldn't see. That old door with the growing crack and the icy breath seemed alive in its own way. I'm not sure I'll ever forget the sensation of standing in that dark hallway, listening to those whispers. I still feel like I was being watched, and that feeling hasn't completely gone away. I never thought I'd regret renting a penthouse in the city. The location was perfect. The layout seemed modern, and the view of the skyline from the balcony took my breath away. But now, when I sit on my bed at night, I feel this heavy pressure in my chest. I can hear my own heart pounding. I look at the wall on my right, and I see the same scratches I covered with paint the day before. They look deeper, almost like something's scraping from inside the wall. I wish I had walked away the moment I saw them, but I didn't, and now I'm stuck dealing with these noises and these marks that keep getting worse. I moved in about a month ago. The day I got the keys, I noticed faint lines on the main bedroom wall. They reminded me of old paint peeling, but they seemed more like claw marks. I just assumed it was the last tenant's weird decorative choice or maybe some damage from furniture being moved. It didn't look urgent. I had boxes to unpack, and the entire place needed some basic cleaning, so I brushed it off. The first night was when things got strange. I was lying in bed, trying to get comfortable. I'm not used to silence, so I usually keep a fan on or some soft music in the background. The room felt strangely still. I got this odd sensation like I wasn't alone. It made no sense. No one had a spare key, and the door was locked. I closed my eyes, trying to convince myself I was just overthinking. Then I heard a soft scraping sound. It sounded like nails on drywall. I opened my eyes and sat up. The noise stopped. I got out of bed and checked the living room, the bathroom, and even the walk-in closet. Nothing. I went back to bed. I heard it again, closer to my headboard. I turned on the lamp. Everything looked normal, except that the marks on the wall seemed darker, like the paint had chipped overnight. I tried to brush my hand over them to see if any dust came off. It felt rough. I went back to bed and eventually fell asleep out of sheer exhaustion. In the morning, I examined the scratches with better light. They were a bit more visible than the day before. It unsettled me. I went out to buy some white paint. I figured a couple of coats would do the trick. I spent part of the afternoon prepping. I laid out some plastic, taped the edges, and applied one coat of primer. Then I did a coat of fresh paint. The wall looked fine again, except for a slight texture difference where the scratches had been. By the time I was done, it was evening. I ordered takeout, had a quick shower, and got ready for my second night in the place. I'm a light sleeper. Every little sound can wake me. Around 2 in the morning, I heard scratching again, the same faint scraping noise. I sat up and turned on the lamp. My pulse raced. I saw a new set of marks forming. It was like someone was pressing from behind the wall. The paint was chipping in thin lines. My mouth went dry. I got closer to see if there was any structural damage, but everything felt solid. No holes, no cracks in the plaster. Just these new lines. I pressed my palm to the wall and I thought I felt a vibration. It was too soft to be certain. After a few minutes, the noise died down. I stayed up until sunrise, too tense to go back to sleep. The next day, I met the superintendent in the hallway. He's a quiet guy, older with gray hair. I told him I noticed some strange scratches in my bedroom and asked if there were any known issues with the building. He said no. He mentioned he'd done a walkthrough after the last tenant moved out and the walls looked fine. I told him that something must be wrong with the structure, or maybe with the pipes. He shook his head and said if there were major cracks, I would see more than a few lines in one spot. He assured me everything was okay. He offered to come up and check it himself. I said sure, hoping he'd find a simple explanation. He looked at the wall, tapped it a few times, and said it felt normal. He told me to let him know if anything got worse. I tried to put it out of my mind, but I couldn't. The marks were too deliberate. They looked like claw marks, spaced a few inches apart, almost parallel. That night I positioned my phone on a chair and set it to record video. I pointed it right at the area on the wall where the scratches had appeared. I thought if there was some rodent or some structural shift, maybe I'd catch it on camera. I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of scraping. My stomach felt tight. I sat up and watched in horror as the paint on the wall peeled back in thin lines. I could actually see it happening in real time. It was a slow, deliberate motion. There was no hand, no instrument, nothing visible. Just the paint curling outward like something was pushing from inside. I grabbed my phone, pointed it at the wall, and tried to record up close. I couldn't see anything but the new scratches forming. I was shaking. The noise stopped after a few minutes. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning I checked the video on my phone. The image was too dark, and the angle wasn't great, but I could hear the scratching. I could see the moment the paint changed. There was no actual object causing it, just the surface distorting. It made me sick to my stomach. I didn't want to show it to anyone because it would make me look insane. By the end of the week, I had painted the wall 3 times, each time applying layers of primer and filler. Each morning, I'd wake up to deeper scratches. My chest felt heavy every night. I grew paranoid. I kept thinking about weird explanations like an animal stuck behind the drywall, but there was no smell, no real sign of any nest. And why would it appear only on that one side of the room, always in the same spot? My second week in the apartment, I decided to get a hammer and see if I could remove a small section of drywall. I waited until midday, when I felt more confident. I chipped away a small square. I expected to find insulation, maybe pipes, maybe some rodent droppings. Instead, I found empty space. It wasn't a big gap, just a few inches of air between my bedroom wall and the next unit. I shone a flashlight inside. I didn't see anything. The space was too narrow for a person or even a large animal to squeeze through. I replaced the section and patched it up. The entire time, I felt uneasy, like I was being watched. My palms were sweaty, and my heartbeat was loud in my ears. At night, I kept hearing those noises. They never lasted more than a few minutes, but it was enough to wreck my sleep. My eyes felt gritty from exhaustion. I started calling in late to work. Some days I couldn't focus. I'd drift off at my desk, replaying the image of that paint peeling in my mind. I considered moving out, but my lease locked me in for a year. I also worried about the cost of breaking the contract, and a part of me wanted an explanation. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical reason for this, even though I hadn't found one yet. One evening, after a particularly bad night, I decided to document everything in a notebook. I wrote the date, the time, and a short description of the scratches. I drew little sketches of how they changed each day. There was a pattern. Every night they grew in length by about an inch. Every night, the lines looked fresher, like something had dragged sharp nails across the surface. The sound always started around 2 or 3 in the morning. It lasted anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes. Then silence. On the third week, I asked the superintendent to come by again. He brought a small flashlight and a moisture meter. He checked for leaks, dampness, or cracks. Everything showed normal readings. He even drilled a tiny hole in a different part of the wall to see if there was any hidden water damage. Nothing. I felt frustrated and embarrassed. He gave me a concerned look and suggested maybe I was dreaming. I told him I had video. He asked to see it. I showed him the grainy footage on my phone. The audio was clear. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The paint visibly changed, but it was hard to see the detail on that small screen. He looked at me like he didn't know what to say. He admitted it was weird, but he also said he'd never heard of anything like this happening in the building. He walked away, shaking his head. I started to feel trapped. I didn't want to spend another night in that bedroom. I tried sleeping on the living room couch, but I could still hear those noises through the walls. I turned on the TV to drown them out, but around 2 in the morning, I heard the same scraping. It was faint but unmistakable. I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and saw the paint curling again. A shiver ran through my entire body. I thought about leaving the apartment right then, maybe staying in a hotel. But it was the middle of the night and I was exhausted. I decided to confront it. I'm not sure what I expected to do, but I grabbed a screwdriver and started scratching at the marks. I muttered to myself that if something was inside the wall, I'd hear a reaction. I didn't hear anything. I pressed my ear to the wall. Nothing. Then, around 3, I heard the scariest sound so far. It was a low growl, or maybe a grunt, like something shifting behind the drywall. My heart pounded. I backed away from the wall. The sound stopped. Over the next few days, my nerves got worse. I felt jumpy all the time. I'd flinch at sudden movements or noises. My body felt tense, like I was ready to run at any moment. I drank coffee during the day to stay awake, which made me jittery. At night, I'd lie in bed telling myself not to freak out, but I always did. I set up more cameras, but the recordings showed the same thing. The paint shifting on its own, lines forming, and that awful scraping noise. I started to dread going home after work. I'd linger at the office, or I'd stop at a cafe just to waste time. My apartment felt hostile. I didn't invite anyone over because I was embarrassed. I kept thinking if someone else saw it, they'd confirm I wasn't crazy, but I also felt protective of the situation, like I needed to solve it myself. I considered calling a contractor, but I didn't even know how to describe the problem. My walls scratch themselves at night. That sounded insane. One night I tried sleeping with headphones on. I put on loud music so I wouldn't hear the scratching. It didn't matter. Around 2:30 in the morning, I felt a vibration through the mattress frame. I pulled off my headphones and heard the scratching. I wanted to scream. I stood up, turned on every light in the apartment, and marched around the room, banging on the walls with my fists. I yelled, "Stop!" My throat felt raw after that. I was sweating, shaking, and breathing hard. The noises stopped for a few seconds, then started again, slow and steady, like a response. I had never felt so powerless in my life. After that, I rarely slept in my bed. Most nights, I'd doze off in the living room with the TV on, but the problem followed me. I started hearing scratching behind the living room walls. I looked for new marks, but they only appeared in the bedroom. Somehow, the noise carried through the rest of the apartment, like it was beckoning me back to that spot. My curiosity grew stronger. I had to know what was behind that wall. At the same time, I wanted to run. I had this constant debate in my head. Get out versus figure it out. In my 4th week there, the marks were halfway across the bedroom wall. They had expanded in all directions, forming a pattern of parallel lines. Some lines branched off, others curved upward. It looked like a series of scars across the surface. I tried new paint brands, different spackling compounds, extra coats of primer. Nothing stayed smooth for more than a night. I called a friend of mine who works in construction and asked if he'd check the place. He came over, tapped around, used a stud finder, and said there was nothing odd. He joked that I should sue the painter for bad materials. I didn't laugh. I showed him the video. He seemed freaked out but tried not to show it. He said maybe it was some weird reaction to moisture or temperature changes. When I pointed out that it happened in a narrow time window each night, he couldn't explain that. He left, and I felt more alone than ever. I'm still here, in this penthouse, listening to the scraping on the other side of the wall. I can't tell if it wants to break through or just remind me that it's there. My mouth is dry and my hands are trembling. I keep the lights on, but the bright overhead bulb doesn't change a thing. The scratches appear no matter how much I try to prevent them. I can't think of a better solution than leaving, but I'm too stubborn or too curious to walk away. Right now, it's almost midnight. I'm typing this because I don't know what else to do. I feel a dull ache in my shoulders from the tension. I catch myself glancing at the wall every few minutes, expecting something to burst through. Part of me wants to run out the door, but then I think about all my stuff here. I think about how I might never know what caused this if I leave. That idea bothers me more than the fear. I turn off my computer, stand up, and walk over to the wall. I place my hand on the surface. It feels cool and solid. No movement, no vibration. Still, I know it's only a matter of time. Maybe a few hours from now, I'll hear the first scratch of the night. Maybe it'll come later, closer to dawn. It's unpredictable. I grab a fresh can of paint, a roller, and a brush. I set them in the corner of the room. I'll probably try to paint it again tomorrow morning, even though I know how pointless that is. I don't know how this ends. All I can say is that I'm wide awake, and I'm waiting. I keep hoping I'll wake up one morning and find the scratches gone for good, but so far that hasn't happened. The noise continues, and the lines get worse. I'm torn between staying here until I lose my mind or breaking the lease and leaving this building behind. But I have no proof that moving somewhere else will fix anything. The thought that whatever's in the wall might follow me is terrifying, but I can't help wondering if it's tied to this place, this unit, these walls. For now, I'm here, sitting in a chair by the window, listening to the buzz of city traffic far below. My heart is pounding, and my eyes are on the bedroom door. The scratching might begin at any moment. When it does, I'll feel my entire body tense up. I'll stand there wishing it would stop, but part of me will move closer to the wall, searching for a clue, waiting for a slip of paint or a small crack to reveal something I can see. I can't help it. I need to know what's behind the wall. I need to know if I'm dealing with a real problem or if I'm just losing my grip. Until I figure it out, I'll be here, watching, listening, dreading every night. I never expected a hand-me-down camera to mess with my head. When I first held it, I felt a strange pull. It was my uncle's old analog camera, something he left behind in a box of dusty belongings. My uncle wasn't close to me. I'd only heard stories about him. People said he was quiet, always roaming around with his camera, taking photos of random things. I figured he was just another hobbyist who stuck with film even when everyone else moved on to digital. When I inherited his camera, I wasn't excited or curious at first. I just tossed it on a shelf. But a few days later, I looked at it again and got a weird feeling. It reminded me of simpler times, maybe the times my uncle enjoyed when he was alive. I decided to give it a try. That decision changed everything. I bought a few rolls of black and white film. I set the camera on my kitchen table. It had a metal body, scuffed edges, and a stiff shutter release. I tried winding it a few times to see if it would jam. It didn't. I liked that mechanical click. It felt solid, like something from a different era. I loaded a roll of film and took my first shots around the house. I snapped the old clock on the living room wall, my cat sleeping on the sofa, the dusty bookshelf. I didn't think much about composition. I just wanted to see if the camera still worked. A few days later, I went to a small local photography store that still developed film. The owner told me I could pick up the prints in a couple of hours. I walked around town while waiting. I had a coffee, glanced at the newspaper, and went back to the store. The owner handed me an envelope with the prints and the negatives. I thanked him and went home. I opened the envelope on my kitchen table. The first few photos were normal. The shot of the clock looked sharp. The cat was slightly out of focus, but still decent. But then I saw something strange in the corner of the shot of my bookshelf. It was a faint outline that looked like a hooded shape. I blinked, thinking it might be a smudge or a processing error. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't a stain. It had distinct edges. It looked like a figure, floating near the ceiling, almost lost in the shadows. My heart thumped in my chest. I touched the print with my fingertip. The shape was so faint that I wondered if it was just a trick of the light. I flipped to the next print. It was a photo of my bathroom door. I had taken it while testing the camera's settings. The same figure, slightly more defined, stood in the far left corner of the frame. I saw a hood. It was pointed at the top and the inside was dark, with no face visible. My palms got sweaty. I checked the rest of the prints. Every single one had this shape. Sometimes it was near the edge, sometimes in the background, but it was always there, like it was watching me. I felt a chill along my spine. I rubbed my arms and stared at the prints for a long time. I told myself it had to be some defect in the lens or a weird reflection, but I couldn't shake the unease in my stomach. I decided to test the camera again, but this time outside. I waited until the next morning, then walked around my neighborhood, snapping pictures of parked cars, the sidewalk, a street sign, anything that wasn't too interesting. I wanted to see if that shape appeared again. The day was bright, so I figured any odd reflection or lens flare would be obvious. I finished the roll and brought it to the same shop. When I got the second set of prints, my heart pounded before I even opened the envelope. I pulled out the photos and spread them on my kitchen table. The figure was there. In some shots, it looked stronger, like it was a solid presence in the background. In one photo, it hovered above a trash can on the corner of the street. I hadn't seen anything at the time. Nobody on the street seemed to react to it. People walked by in the shot, but they didn't look at it or point. It was invisible to everyone, except the camera. I felt my breathing get shallow. My fingertips felt cold. I flicked through the prints trying to find an explanation. I checked the negatives, but there was no sign of scratches or marks that would cause this. It looked like a real object captured in the frame. My gut tightened, and I started to sweat. I remembered an old story my mother once told me about my uncle. She said he used to get up at odd hours of the night to photograph empty roads or abandoned buildings. She said he once claimed he saw something following him. I always dismissed it as rumor, but now my head swam with questions. I decided to keep this to myself. I didn't want to sound crazy, but I also felt drawn to keep photographing. I wanted to see if the figure would show up again, maybe reveal some pattern or clue, so I bought more rolls of film. I started carrying the camera with me everywhere. I took pictures of my apartment, the laundry room in the basement, the hallway outside my door, the parking lot behind my building. It always appeared. Every time it was in a different spot. Sometimes it was small, barely visible. Other times it looked closer and more detailed. The camera seemed to be showing me something I couldn't see with my own eyes. That thought made my muscles tense up. I found myself checking over my shoulder, as if I expected to see it in real life. But I never did. I only saw it in the prints. It became an obsession. I set up a tiny dark room in my bathroom. I hung blackout curtains, got some basic chemicals, and started developing film on my own. I wanted to see each shot as soon as possible. I learned how to do it from online tutorials. At first, I messed up a lot. The prints came out too light or too dark. But then I got better, and every time I dunked the paper in the developer, I felt my stomach churn with a mix of excitement and dread. A few weeks into this routine, I noticed something new. The figure was getting bigger in each set of pictures. At first, it was just a faint outline. Then it gained clear edges. Then I could see the folds in the hood, like some thick cloth. My hands trembled as I hung the prints to dry. My mouth felt dry, and I swallowed hard. I turned around, half expecting to see that shape in the corner of my bathroom. But I only saw the red glow of my safety light and the reflection of my own sweaty face in the mirror. I tried to stop taking photos. I told myself this was too weird, that I should just put the camera away, but I couldn't resist. Part of me needed to keep going. I started losing sleep. I lay in bed at night with the camera on my nightstand, my mind racing with questions. I wanted to figure out if this thing was some glitch or if it was something else. My body felt on edge all the time. My neck and shoulders hurt from being so tense. One night, I decided to take pictures in the dark. I set up a tripod in my living room and took long exposures. The camera's shutter stayed open for a few seconds each time. I felt a strange buzz in my ears like static. I kept looking around as I pressed the shutter release. My heart pounded. When I developed those shots, the figure was in the same corner of every frame, but it looked like it was coming closer to the center of the photo. Its hood was turned toward me, although I still couldn't see a face. The inside of the hood was just black. I felt my hands shaking when I laid out the prints on the table. I thought about burning them, but I couldn't make myself do it. I started to wonder if the figure was always around me, just outside my field of vision, and the camera was the only thing that could capture it. That idea made me paranoid. I took shorter showers, worried about letting my guard down. I turned on every light in my apartment when I got home. I jumped at any creak in the floorboards. My phone rang once and I almost dropped it because my nerves were shot. I kept imagining that shape in the corners of rooms, quietly hanging there. After a while, I began to notice small details. My apartment felt colder. The air conditioner wasn't running and it was the middle of the day, yet my living room felt like a draft was blowing through. The lights flickered sometimes, but only for a moment. I tried to tell myself it was old wiring, but I couldn't ignore how my hair stood on end when it happened. I also had a constant sense of being watched. When I turned around, there was nothing there, but the feeling didn't go away. I stopped going out except to buy more film and groceries. I missed a few days of work. My phone buzzed with messages from coworkers, but I didn't have the energy to respond. I only thought about the camera and the figure. Each time I developed a new batch of photos, the shape looked more defined. I noticed the hood had a sort of texture like thick fabric. The arms, if they were arms, were hidden under the cloak, so I couldn't see hands. I kept searching the photos for any sign of a face, but it was just darkness. In some shots, I swore I saw a slight tilt of the head, like it was focusing on me. My chest would tighten, and I had to force myself to breathe slowly. My obsession grew. I took photos at different angles and different lighting, hoping to force the shape to reveal something. I placed mirrors in front of the camera. I tried taking pictures through windows, through the reflection in the TV screen, anything to see if the figure would change. It didn't. It stayed the same. Always wearing that hood, always present in the developed prints. I started feeling lightheaded when I thought about how close it might be to me in real life. Late one night, I heard a soft rustling in the hallway. It could have been a neighbor returning from somewhere, but it sounded too close, like someone was brushing against my door. I got my camera and pressed my ear to the door. My heart hammered. I couldn't hear anything else. I slid the camera's strap over my neck, turned off all the lights, and opened the door a crack. The hallway was dark, with only one weak bulb near the stairs. I didn't see anyone. My breath caught in my throat. I raised the camera and snapped a picture of the empty hallway. The shutter click echoed. I shut the door and locked it, my hands shaking. I developed that shot right away. My head felt hot, and my hands were clammy. I went through the process of loading the film onto the reel, mixing the chemicals, agitating the tank. My mouth felt dry, and I had to keep swallowing. Then I took out the negatives under the red light and laid them out. I printed the hallway photo. When I put the paper into the developer tray, I watched the image materialize. My stomach clenched. The figure was there, hovering right in front of my door. It was closer than ever, maybe just a few inches away from the lens. The hood faced the camera. I could see a hint of texture inside that dark opening, like a swirl of shadows. My throat tightened, and I broke into a cold sweat. I started to feel sick. My vision blurred for a moment, and I had to steady myself on the counter. My instincts told me to throw the camera away, get rid of all the prints, and leave my apartment. But I couldn't do it. Something locked me in place. My mind buzzed with the question of what would happen if I confronted the figure in person. Would it appear if I looked hard enough without the camera? Or did it only live on film? I spent the next day pacing around my apartment. I kept glancing at the camera on my table. My heartbeat was fast, and my chest felt tight. The curtains were closed, and the only light in the room was from a small desk lamp. I wanted to take more pictures, but I also feared what I'd see. Every few minutes, I ran a hand through my hair and exhaled, trying to calm down. I couldn't focus on anything else. I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. Finally, I decided to take one last set of photos inside my apartment. I wanted to see if the figure was right there with me. I went to each corner of my living room, snapping shots of the furniture, the walls, the windows. Then I moved to my bedroom, taking pictures of the closet, the bed, the space under the bed, the nightstand. My pulse pounded. I felt a chill on my skin, like the air was heavier. I snapped a picture of the bathroom mirror, my face half visible in the reflection. Then I locked myself in the bathroom and developed the film. The first print showed the living room corner. The figure was there, closer than before. In the second print, it stood near the window. In the third, near my couch. My breathing became ragged. The fourth and fifth prints showed the hooded shape in the bedroom. One print showed it standing at the foot of my bed. The next showed it near the closet. In each shot, it inched closer to where I was standing when I took the photo. My heartbeat thumped in my ears. I finally looked at the bathroom mirror print. I felt a wave of heat run through my body. My reflection was on the left side of the image, my eyes wide. Next to me, almost behind me, stood the figure. It looked like it was reaching out toward me. My face in the mirror showed pure tension, like I was sensing something but not seeing it. I couldn't look away from the print. My mouth went dry, and I started trembling. It was right behind me when I took that shot. Now I'm sitting in my living room with all the lights on. The camera is on the table, loaded with one more roll of film. I haven't decided if I'll use it again. I feel the walls closing in. My hands are unsteady, and my stomach churns. I keep looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that shape. I wonder if it's already in the room waiting for me to take another photo. My heart thumps in my chest, and I feel a tightness in my throat. I'm afraid that each new picture will pull it closer, make it clearer. but some part of me still wants to press that shutter button one more time, just to see if I can catch it in full detail. I don't know what's worse, not knowing if it's there or confirming that it's inches away from me. Right now, I can't escape the urge to find out. That camera might be my only chance to see what's stalking me, or it might be the reason it's here in the first place. I'm gripping the camera as I write this. The metal feels cold. My heart is pounding, and the room feels claustrophobic. I'm going to decide in the next few minutes whether I take another photo or throw this camera into the trash and leave. But I'm not sure if leaving will even help, because I have a deep feeling that whatever this thing is, it's not just in the camera anymore. It's right here, with me, whether I like it or not. And I can't stop looking at the camera because part of me still thinks it's the only proof I have that I'm not imagining all of this. Yet every time I develop a role, I feel this presence growing stronger. I can't tell if the camera's revealing it or inviting it. All I know is that I can't turn back now. I feel it closing in on me. And I don't know what happens if it steps out of the frame and into my life for good. I moved into this house because the rent was cheap. The day I signed the lease, I felt a slight unease, but I figured it was just nerves about living on my own for the first time. I remember standing in the empty living room, looking at the bare walls, feeling an odd quiet. The real estate agent had told me there were no problems with the electrical system. The place looked clean, and nothing seemed off during the daytime. I wish I had known that every night at exactly the same time all the lights would go out. I wish I had known about the voice that hides in the darkness. I wouldn't have moved in if I had known. I noticed the first power outage on the third night. It happened around 2 a.m. I had been in bed, trying to sleep, but the house felt too silent. I was staring at the ceiling, half expecting something to happen, even though I had no real reason to feel that way. Then the lights in the hallway went out. My digital clock on the nightstand went blank. My ceiling fan stopped spinning. Every source of light vanished at once. I felt my stomach tighten. I sat up in bed, blinked, and listened. At first I heard nothing. Then a single soft sound. It wasn't a dripping faucet or the rustle of a neighbor's steps. It sounded like a whisper, but I couldn't make out any words. I stayed still for maybe 30 seconds. My chest felt heavy. My breathing got faster. I told myself to calm down, that it was just a power outage. I tried to get out of bed to find the flashlight I kept in the kitchen drawer. I put my feet on the floor and stood up carefully, holding my arms out in front of me in the darkness. I couldn't see a thing. My pulse pounded in my ears. I felt like the air around me had turned thick and cold. That was when I heard the voice again. It was a single word, maybe my name, but it was so faint I couldn't be sure. It sounded like it came from the far corner of my bedroom, then shifted to the opposite side. I whipped my head around, but I saw only darkness. My mouth went dry. I made my way to the bedroom door by feeling along the wall. My hand kept shaking. I took slow steps, listening for any movement. I heard nothing except my own breathing. Then I heard the voice call my name, clearly this time. It was a hoarse whisper, low and broken, like somebody trying to speak without using their vocal cords. It said, "Daniel." It sounded like it came from behind me, near the closet. I froze. I didn't know if I should run outside or keep going for the flashlight. My heart beat so loud I could feel it in my temples. I forced myself to move. When I reached the hallway, I noticed the entire house was blacked out. No clock lights, no standby lights on the TV or microwave. Not even the faint glow from the street lamp outside. It was like all electricity to the house had been severed. I stumbled into the living room. My hands ran over the sofa, the coffee table, and finally the kitchen counter. I yanked open the drawer and grabbed the flashlight. I flicked it on, relieved to see a bright beam. I pointed it around the kitchen. No one was there. I swung the beam toward the hallway and bedroom. I took a few steps back in that direction. My fingers trembled around the flashlight. My legs felt weak. Then I heard that voice again, but it was just a low mumble this time, like nonsense sounds. I couldn't tell if it was speaking a language or just making noise. It seemed to come from everywhere. It echoed off the walls as if the house was hollow. I called out, "Who's there?" My voice sounded shaky. There was no answer. The mumbling stopped. Then, as suddenly as it had gone out, the power came back. The lights flicked on, the refrigerator hummed, and I could see everything clearly. The clock on the stove flashed 12Y, like it had reset. The bedroom light was on, revealing an empty space. Nothing was disturbed. I stood there for a long time, breathing hard, feeling sweat roll down my neck. The next morning I checked all the breakers. Nothing looked wrong. I used a voltage tester on a few outlets. Everything worked fine. I called the electric company. They said there were no outages in the area and no service interruptions. I asked a neighbor if they had lost power at 2 a.m. They said no. They looked at me like I was asking a weird question. I tried to explain that my house had gone completely dark, but they acted like it might have been a simple glitch. They seemed unconcerned, so I let it go. That night, I waited. I stayed up past midnight sitting on the couch in the living room, leaving a few lights on waiting to see what would happen. I had turned on the TV for background noise. I was half dozing, but kept glancing at the clock. At exactly 2 a.m., everything shut off again. The TV screen went black, the lamp died, and every light in the house disappeared. I held my breath and listened. My palms started sweating. My forehead felt cold. Then I heard it, a whisper that sounded like it brushed past my ear. I jerked my head around, but there was no one behind me. The voice seemed to move behind the couch, then across the room, then near the front door. It kept drifting from spot to spot with no pattern. Sometimes I heard my name. Other times I heard bits of sound that made no sense. I fumbled around for my phone. I turned on its flashlight. The phone showed no signal, which was strange. I tried to unlock it, but the screen kept freezing. My nerves were frayed. I stood up, shining the phone light around the living room. I saw nothing. Then the voice said my name again. Daniel. It sounded louder and more distinct than the previous night. I felt an urge to run to the door, but I didn't. My body trembled. My teeth started chattering. I yelled, "Show yourself!" I felt a wave of panic when I realized I probably didn't want anything to show itself. I waited. The voice went silent. I only heard the hum of my own breathing, ragged and quick. Suddenly the power came back. My lamp flickered on, and I stood in the middle of the living room, shining a useless phone flashlight into a lit space. I turned it off and tried to steady myself. I felt nauseated. I sat down on the couch, hands shaking. The clock on the TV said 2:03 a.m. It had only been a few minutes of darkness. That short time felt like an hour. Over the next week, it happened every night at exactly 2 a.m. I tried different strategies. One night, I stayed in the kitchen with a flashlight in hand. Another night, I waited in the bedroom with every possible light turned on. Nothing changed. The power cut always happened. The voice always returned. Sometimes it whispered my name. Sometimes it made random noises. I could never figure out exactly where it came from. It always felt like it was circling me. My body would tense up as soon as the lights died. My breath would catch in my throat and my heart would pound. By day, the power worked fine. I had no problems with appliances, no flickering lights. Everything was normal. But once the clock neared 2 a.m., I'd feel my muscles tighten and my hands go clammy. I tried calling an electrician. He came by in the afternoon, tested the outlets, looked at the breaker box, and said everything was in good shape. He told me I might have a loose connection somewhere, but he couldn't find it. He left, and I hoped maybe his inspection had fixed something by accident. It didn't. That night, the lights cut out as usual. The voice murmured near my bedroom door. I tried to record it on my phone, but all I got was static. I ended up with an audio file that sounded like a faint hiss and a few weird clicks. Nothing I could show someone as proof. The anxiety started to affect my daily life. I couldn't focus at work. I snapped at people during simple conversations. Every night I dreaded going home. I drank too much coffee during the day just to stay awake. I started looking at hotel rates, thinking maybe I should just leave for a while. But the thought of paying for a hotel every night seemed impossible. I asked a few more neighbors if they ever had power outages at 2 a.m. They said no. Some gave me suspicious looks, like they thought I was making it up. Others seemed polite, but they obviously had no idea what I was going through. One neighbor suggested I try installing a backup generator. I said thanks and walked away. I didn't bother trying to explain the voice. I tried to keep a routine in the evenings. I'd cook dinner, watch TV, maybe try to read. But once it got close to 2 a.m., I'd start to sweat. My stomach would churn. My legs would feel weak. Some nights I'd pace back and forth in the living room, waiting for the inevitable. Other nights I'd try to keep myself busy, but I'd constantly glance at the clock. I'd count the minutes until the lights died. It was torture. When the outage finally happened, I'd freeze and listen, waiting for the voice. It always came. Sometimes it said my name in a raspy tone. Other times it made strange babbling noises. Once it sounded like it was right behind me, near my ear. Another time it felt like it was coming from the ceiling. No matter how I turned or where I pointed my flashlight, I never saw a shape or a form. The voice was just there, disembodied, filling the space around me. My nights blurred together. I stopped sleeping more than an hour or two at a time. I'd drink water to calm myself, but my hands would shake so badly I'd spill it. My appetite vanished. I woke up in the mornings feeling drained, as if I'd been running all night. I kept telling myself I'd figure out the cause or I'd leave, but I didn't leave. I told myself I wouldn't let this thing win. My mind felt split between fear and anger. During the day, I'd gather some courage and plan ways to prove to myself there was a logical explanation. But as soon as it got dark, all that courage disappeared. One night, after about 3 weeks, I snapped. I was too tired to keep dealing with the same routine. I grabbed a folding chair from the garage and set it up in the middle of the living room. I placed flashlights on the coffee table. I set my phone to record audio. I sat down at 1:50 a.m. and waited. I stared at the clock. My palms were sweating so much I had to wipe them on my pants. My legs shook. When 2 a.m. arrived, the power cut. The living room lamp died, and everything went black. My phone still glowed faintly as it recorded. I switched on a flashlight, aiming it straight ahead. I spoke into the darkness loud and clear. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. If you have something to say it." My throat felt tight as I forced the words out. My body tensed, ready for whatever might happen. The voice started as a slow murmur from the corner behind me. I turned the flashlight, but saw only the blank wall. Then I heard it again. "Daniel," it said, slow and drawn out. I pointed the light toward the hallway, but no one was there. My heartbeat felt erratic. My mouth was so dry I could barely swallow. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice shaking. It didn't answer with words. Instead, it let out a series of hisses and garbled sounds. They rose in volume, surrounding me. I pointed the flashlight in every direction, but there was nothing. My shoulders were locked. My muscles started to ache. A chill spread across my neck as if something cold was breathing on me. I stayed in that chair, refusing to move. After maybe 2 minutes, the voice quieted. The darkness felt heavy. Then the power flicked back on. The sudden brightness made me wince. The clock read 2:03 a.m. I stood up, my legs trembling, and I looked at my phone. I stopped the recording. When I played it back, I heard only static, clicks, and faint pops of noise. No clear voice. No proof. I felt my stomach lurch. My anger flared. I tossed the phone onto the couch in frustration. I felt helpless. After that night, I started considering moving out. The lease had a penalty for early termination, but I didn't care. I needed sleep. I needed peace. Yet part of me wanted to find out what caused this. I called the real estate agent, demanding answers. She claimed she knew nothing. She said the house had a clean history. She advised me to call an electrician again or check with the utility company. I said I would, but my gut told me I'd just get the same empty answers. I talked to a friend, trying to get him to spend the night at my place to witness the outage. He said he'd come over on a weekend. But when the weekend arrived, he canceled, claiming he had an emergency. I wondered if he sensed how nervous I was and got spooked. I spent that weekend alone, dealing with the nightly routine. The voice sounded more aggressive, like it was louder. My hands wouldn't stop shaking even during the day. One evening, I caught a reflection of myself in the mirror. My eyes had dark circles. My face looked pale. I realized I was falling apart. I went online and searched for any stories about odd power outages. I found nothing that matched my exact situation. I tried searching for strange voices in the dark, but most sites looked like people's ghost stories or random rumors. None of it helped. I felt more isolated than ever. It's been a month of these nightly visits now. My decision is almost made. My stuff is half packed. I have boxes in the living room. I called the landlord and said I was leaving. I don't care about the penalty. I'm done. The nights have become too long. The moment 1:59 a.m. hits, I can't control the tremors in my hands. I can't slow my racing heart. The voice always comes, and it always says my name or mutters nonsense. I can't see any source. There's nothing physical I can fight or confront. I don't know why it targets me, and I have no proof to show anyone. All I have is this sick feeling in my gut every night and a mind that won't settle down. I haven't slept more than 3 hours in a row since the first outage. My chest feels tight. My legs feel weak. My mind jumps at every little noise, even during daylight. I don't know if there's a reasonable explanation. I don't know if it's something supernatural. I just know I can't take it anymore. I'm planning to leave tomorrow. I'll crash on a friend's couch until I find a new place. I'll never look back. I'm done trying to solve it. I want a decent night's sleep. I want to stop looking at the clock. I want to stop hearing my name whispered in the dark. Right now it's 1:50 a.m. I'm sitting on the living room floor, typing this out on my laptop with the battery at full charge, just in case. The lights are still on, but I know they won't stay that way. It's almost time. My stomach is already in knots. My knees feel shaky. My throat is dry. Every inch of my body is tense. I'm not going to wait in silence. I'm leaving as soon as the power comes back. I don't care if it's the middle of the night. I'll grab my suitcase and my car keys and I'll go. I can't live like this anymore. I'm glancing at the clock. 1:59 a.m. The lights just flickered. The lamp on the side table dimmed for a split second. My heart is pounding. The laptop screen is trembling in front of my eyes. I think it's going to happen now. The power just shut off. Everything's black. I can't see. The voice, it's right behind me. It just said my name again. My ears are ringing. I feel cold air on my neck. I'm breathing fast. I'm done. As soon as the lights come back, I'm running out of here. I can't stay. The voice is so close now. It keeps whispering. It's calling me over and over. I'm gripping my laptop, trying to keep it steady. My hands won't stop shaking. The whispering is circling me. I can't see a thing, but I can hear it. It's practically next to my face. I want to scream, but I can't make a sound. This is the last time. Once the power returns, I'm gone. I just want to get through these next few minutes. My heart is hammering. My lungs are tight. I can taste my own fear. It's stuck in my throat. The power just came back. Lights are on. I see the empty living room. There's no one here. The clock on the wall is blinking, showing 12. Wow. I'm slamming my laptop shut. I'm grabbing my keys. I'm not staying another second in this place. I'm done. This house can keep its darkness and its voice. I'm out the door. I'm never coming back. I still remember the moment I first saw that mirror. The frame was gold with a dull shine that caught my attention from across the antique shop. It felt like a magnet. I walked up to it, ran my fingers along the edges, and told the shop owner I wanted it. He wrapped it up right away. I didn't even negotiate the price. I just wanted that mirror in my home. I live alone in a small house on a quiet street. There's barely enough space for all my things, but I cleared a spot near my bedroom door for the mirror. I leaned it against the wall, planning to hang it properly once I had time. That night, I turned on the hallway light to admire it. The glass was perfectly smooth when I last checked in the shop, but I suddenly noticed tiny cracks near the top. I ran my thumb across one. It didn't feel sharp or deep, but it shouldn't have been there. I stood there in silence, confused. I figured it must have happened during transport. It bothered me a bit, but I wasn't furious about it. The frame itself was still beautiful, so I decided to let it go. A day later, I woke up for work and saw more of those cracks spreading downward like a thin web. The mirror didn't look shattered or anything. It just had faint lines branching out from that first spot. I leaned forward to inspect them. They didn't look random. They formed some sort of pattern. I still tried not to make a big deal out of it. I told myself it could be normal wear from an old mirror. I shrugged it off and went about my day. That same evening, I found myself uneasy. I flipped on the hallway light again and checked the mirror. It was still intact, but now the cracks seemed to have doubled. My reflection appeared distorted in certain spots. I felt a momentary chill when I saw my own face split by one of the lines. I moved closer, trying to see if the cracks were on the outer surface or deeper in the glass. I couldn't tell. They felt smooth to the touch, but they were definitely there. Over the next couple of days, I kept an eye on it. Each day, new cracks showed up. They were hair-thin and spread in every direction. The mirror still reflected my shape, but it looked more and more warped. At that point, I was getting annoyed. I considered taking it back to the shop and demanding a refund. However, something about the frame was still fascinating to me. I felt drawn to it. It was like a silent challenge. I thought maybe I could pay someone to restore the glass. Late one night, I got up to get a glass of water. On my way back from the kitchen, the hallway was dark except for a soft glow from a streetlight outside. I passed the mirror and glanced at it out of habit. My breath caught in my throat. I saw my reflection, but behind me, there was another shape. A face. It was pale and still. I froze in place. My pulse pounded in my ears. I stared into the mirror, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. After a few seconds, I forced myself to turn around and look behind me. There was nobody there. My hallway was empty. I switched on the light, my hand shaking. When I looked back at the mirror, the face was gone. I felt my hands start to sweat. I told myself I must have been half asleep, and I tried to brush it off. But I wasn't able to forget that face, and I barely slept for the rest of the night. The next day, I pretended everything was normal. I went to work and tried to focus on my tasks. But that strange image kept popping into my mind. By the time I got home, it was already dark. I paused in front of the mirror again, this time with the lights on. Nothing looked unusual in the reflection. I stood there a good while, waiting to see if something would appear. It didn't. I felt silly, like I was scaring myself on purpose. So I took a shower, ate a sandwich, and tried to unwind. Eventually, I turned off most of the lights and got ready to sleep. Around midnight, I felt a pull toward the hallway. My heart was already beating faster. I knew I didn't want to see anything, but I couldn't resist. So I went there, no lights on, letting the faint street lamp glow spill in through the window. I forced my eyes to focus on my reflection. At first, I only saw my own figure, plus those scattered cracks. Then, slowly, that same face started to form in the mirror, right behind my shoulder. It appeared faint, like a white shape fading into view. I felt my mouth go dry. I told myself not to panic, not to run. My legs trembled anyway. I spun around. The hallway was empty again. No movement, no sound, nothing but my own uneven breathing. I turned back to the mirror. The face was gone again. This time I whispered to myself, "What the hell is happening?" My voice came out shaky. My palms were damp and I felt cold despite the mild night. I thought about dragging the mirror out to the sidewalk, but I didn't. I went back to my bedroom and locked the door. I lay in bed, forcing my eyes shut, but sleep took a long time to come. The following morning, I examined the mirror in daylight. More cracks had appeared, but the glass was still in one piece. I pressed my palm against it. It felt cool, almost icy. My mind drifted to the face I had seen. I wondered if it was just my imagination. Still, it felt too real. I kept thinking about how pale it was, how there were no clear details, just the suggestion of a human shape. I frowned at my reflection. The cracks zigzagged across my image. I stepped back and decided to keep the mirror for now. Part of me wanted to see if I could catch that face in full daylight. The other part was scared of what I might find. That night I set up a small lamp in the hallway, aiming it toward the mirror. I figured if there was something to see, bright light might show it. I waited until around midnight, standing a few feet away from the mirror. At first, nothing happened. I just saw my reflection, the gold frame, and the network of cracks. Then I moved closer and tried to stare past my own image. My heart felt like a drum in my chest. I started to think I was wasting my time, but I stayed. And then I saw movement. My reflection seemed to ripple. I took a step back, eyes wide, and watched a faint shape slide into view. It was that face again, but it looked closer, leaning in right behind my left shoulder. I noticed a slight tilt to its head, as if it were trying to see me from the side. I felt a wave of cold wash over me. I couldn't breathe normally. I wanted to speak, but my mouth stayed shut. My hand reached out to touch the mirror. I pressed my fingers against one of the cracks. I heard my own heartbeat in my ears, loud and fast. I tried to push my fear down and focus on the shape. It was hard to see details, but it seemed more defined than before. The outline of a jaw, maybe the curve of a cheekbone. It didn't move except for that initial shift. I forced myself to speak. "Who are you?" My voice was just a broken whisper. The face didn't respond. It just lingered there in the glass. After a few seconds, it vanished. My reflection was alone again. I stumbled back, switched off the lamp, and hurried to my bedroom. My hands were shaking so much I could barely twist the doorknob. Once inside, I locked the door and leaned against it, feeling my chest tighten. I knew I wasn't imagining this. Over the next few nights, the same pattern repeated. Whenever I dared to look in the mirror in low light, the face appeared. Each time it seemed a little closer, like it was edging forward behind me. Every time I turned around to check the hallway, there was nobody there. The rest of my house felt normal, except for the cold dread I felt whenever I got near that mirror. During the day, I thought about throwing it out. I'd even drag it to the front door, but then I'd stop. I had this nagging feeling I needed to figure out what it was. Maybe I thought there was a rational explanation, though that logic was falling apart with each encounter. One afternoon, I took a magnifying glass to the mirror, looking at each crack. They didn't look random anymore. They formed branching lines from one central point near the top. I had a sudden thought that maybe they weren't cracks in the usual sense. They looked more like fractures that never fully broke. I touched them again. The glass felt smooth. No jagged edges, no chips. Just an intricate web of lines. It was unsettling, but I couldn't break away from examining it. That night, I tried something new. I put a chair in front of the mirror, turned off all the lights except a small nightlight, and sat facing it. I told myself I'd watch the mirror for as long as it took to see the face again. I sat there, hands on my knees, trying to keep my breathing steady. After about 20 minutes, my eyes felt tired, and my neck got stiff. I almost gave up. Then I saw the faint outline drifting into place. It emerged slowly, like it was stepping out of a shadow. My stomach twisted. The face hovered inches behind my reflection's shoulder. I gritted my teeth and resisted the urge to turn around. I leaned forward. I saw the shape shift a bit, as though it was turning its head to look at me. My heart hammered, and my mouth felt dry. I noticed my reflection's expression was tense, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. I looked terrified. The face in the mirror just hung there. It looked at me or through me, I couldn't tell. I raised my hand slowly, lifting it toward the mirror's surface. My reflection copied me. The shape in the mirror seemed to lean even closer. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise and my stomach clenched. My fingertips touched the glass and I felt a sudden chill shoot through my arm. I jerked back, breathing hard. My head throbbed and my chest felt tight. I moved my hand around, trying to shake off the cold sensation. When I looked up at the mirror, the face was gone. My reflection showed only me, sweaty and wide-eyed. I turned on the hallway light and stood up. My legs were weak and my arms tingled. The mirror's cracks glimmered under the bright light, but there was no sign of anything else. I shut the light off again, expecting the face might return, but it didn't. I felt an ache in my neck from tension. I ended up pacing the house for a while, unable to calm down. That evening was a turning point. After that, every time I caught sight of my reflection in low light, I noticed that face was inches from me, like it was waiting. There were times I felt I should just take the mirror outside and smash it, but each time I approached it, a sense of dread locked me up. It wasn't a typical fear, either. It felt like if I destroyed the mirror, I'd open a door I couldn't close. I hated that feeling, but it kept me stuck. I tried ignoring it. I tried leaving the lights on all night. But eventually, I'd wake up and wander over, staring at the mirror in the dark, waiting to see that shape again. My body reacted with a rush of heat, a knot in my stomach and a tense ache in my shoulders. My breath would catch in my throat. Sometimes I'd gasp or let out a low groan when I spotted the face. Every time it looked closer. One night I swore I saw its eyes, dark, sunken hollows. My skin crawled at the memory. Finally, I made a decision. I had to learn where this mirror came from. Maybe the antique shop owner could explain. So on a Saturday morning, I packed the mirror in my car and drove back to that shop. The owner was there sipping coffee. I told him the mirror had developed cracks. He just gave me a blank look and said he didn't remember me buying it. That made no sense. I asked him about the mirror's origin, but he insisted he didn't keep detailed records. He offered me a refund, but that didn't help with my questions. I tried to press him. He said he didn't recognize the mirror. Then he handed me the cash and told me I could leave the mirror with him if I wanted. Something in my gut told me not to. I picked it up and left, ignoring his confused stare. Back home, I leaned the mirror against the living room wall. I was tired of keeping it in the bedroom area. I stayed up that night on the couch staring at it, half expecting that pale face to pop up even in the living room lights. But nothing happened. Around 2 a.m, I turned the lights off except for a small lamp, then turned toward the mirror. My reflection looked shaky in the dim light. For a minute, I thought nothing would happen, and I almost felt relieved. Then I saw it. The shape appeared behind me, closer than ever. It seemed to be leaning right over my shoulder, its features more defined, though still blank in some places. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I felt my throat tighten as if I was about to choke. I decided to talk directly to it again. My voice came out hoarse. "What do you want?" No answer. The shape hovered silent. I felt an icy tension in my spine. My hands curled into fists, and I considered smashing the mirror right there. But I couldn't move. I tried to steady my breathing, focusing on the feeling of the floor under my feet. My vision blurred with tears of frustration and fear, but I kept my eyes on the reflection. The face leaned closer, almost touching the back of my head in the image. My chest tightened so much it hurt. At that moment, I felt the raw edge of my own fear. I backed away, arms shaking. I left the mirror there and went to my bedroom, slamming the door. I didn't sleep well. My mind kept picturing that face creeping up behind me in every reflective surface I passed. I avoided mirrors at work, the rearview mirror in my car, even the glass of store windows. That's where I am now, uncertain and exhausted. The mirror still stands in my living room. The cracks haven't gone away. They look darker now and the shape appears every night. I can't tell if it's trying to reach me or just follow me, but I feel its presence whenever I shut my eyes. My gut twists every time I think about dumping it, yet I can't stand the idea of letting it stay. Part of me still wants an explanation. Another part of me just wants this horror to end. I haven't decided if I'll destroy it or drag it back to that shop. I haven't decided if I'll try to confront whatever's in there. All I know is that face keeps getting closer, and I feel a chill run through my body every time I see it. I'm stuck here living with this mirror, not sure what it means or how it started, but I can't let it go and I can't bring myself to keep it. I stand in front of it every night, waiting for the face, knowing it'll come. And it does. And each time I feel my whole body lock up, my heart pound and my breathing catch. That's my life now, watching a face that isn't mine appear behind my reflection and trying to figure out how to end this for good. I walk into this rented country house on a late afternoon. The place feels quiet. I hear the distant rustle of leaves outside. The caretaker gave me the key and left without saying much. He only mentioned that there was a piano in the living room, as if it was just another piece of furniture. I didn't think twice about it at first. I was tired from the drive. I wanted to leave my bags in the bedroom, wash my face, and sit down for a while. When I opened the front door, I noticed the musty smell in the hallway. The walls are a dull white color. The floorboards creak under my feet. I step inside, close the door, and drop my bags on a small table. There's an old coat rack leaning against the wall. I don't see anything special. It's just an average country house with a few wooden chairs, a simple rug, and some faded pictures on the walls. The caretaker said the electricity works, but it's not very reliable. I flip the light switch. The ceiling lamp comes on with a weak glow. I walk into the living room. The first thing I see is that piano against the far wall. It's dark brown with scratches all over. The wood looks worn. The keys are dusty. I can see a few spider webs clinging to the corners. There's no bench in front of it, just a single dining chair that someone dragged over at some point. The top of the piano is decorated with a couple of old vases. No flowers inside them. I catch myself staring at it longer than I intended. I'm not a musician. I don't know how to play. Yet something about that piano holds my attention. It feels heavier than the rest of the room. The silence around it seems different. I blink a few times and turn away. I tell myself it's just an old instrument. I go to the kitchen and open the fridge. There's nothing inside except a bottle of water and some leftover takeout. I toss the takeout. I pour a glass of water and drink it. My throat is dry. I decide to explore the house. There's a bedroom with a small bed, a desk, and a closet. The sheets on the bed look clean enough. There's a narrow window that shows the backyard. I see some overgrown grass and a few trees. The caretaker said there's a path that leads to a small pond, but I might check it out later. For now, I'm thinking about dinner. I realize I should have bought some groceries on my way here. I guess I'll make do with whatever I have in my car for the night. As the sun sets, I switch on the living room lamp. The light flickers a bit, but stays on. I sit down on the couch, feeling the worn cushions under me. My eyes keep drifting to the piano. It's like it's waiting for me to do something. I shake off the thought. I turn on my phone to check for reception. It's weak, but I can send a text if needed. I realize I'm tired. I decide to head to the bedroom early. During the night, I wake up to a soft sound. At first, I think it's the wind outside. Then I hear something else. It's music. Slow, gentle notes. My heart starts pounding. I lie there for a moment, listening. The tune is coming from the living room. I sit up in bed, my hands gripping the blanket. I hear a faint whisper, but I can't make out the words. It sounds like someone saying my name, but I'm not sure. I feel a cold sweat on my forehead. I get out of bed and tiptoe to the bedroom door. My pulse is racing. I open the door a crack and peek into the hallway. It's dark. The light I left on in the living room is off. I see the silhouette of the furniture. The piano is in the corner. I hear those notes again, soft and uneven like an old music box, but the keys are moving. I can see them moving, even though there's no one there. The whisper gets a little louder, almost a hiss, repeating my name. My mouth feels dry. I flick the light switch on the wall. The lamp flickers, then it turns on. The music stops immediately. The keys stop moving. The piano looks ordinary again. I step into the living room, my hands shaking. I rub my eyes. My heartbeat is loud in my ears. I go up to the piano and stand there staring at it. My reflection in the wooden surface is faint. I notice my own face is pale. I walk around it, checking if there's any kind of device or speaker. I find nothing. It's just an old piano. I check the windows. They're locked. No sign of anyone around. I swallow hard. I tell myself I must be tired or imagining things. I go back to bed but can't sleep. My mind races. Every time I close my eyes, I think I hear that melody again. I toss and turn until morning. When I finally get out of bed, my head hurts. I splash cold water on my face. My reflection in the bathroom mirror shows dark circles under my eyes. I wonder if I should just leave this place. But I paid for a week, and part of me refuses to believe in anything supernatural. Yet I can't ignore what I saw. I decide to spend the day outside, away from the piano. I go for a walk in the backyard. The sun is warm on my skin. The grass is tall and scratches against my ankles. I follow the path to the pond. The water looks green. I sit on a flat rock by the edge and throw a few pebbles. The splashes echo. I try to calm down. I breathe slowly. I think about calling the caretaker, but I don't know what I'd tell him. "Hey, your piano is playing by itself." That sounds ridiculous. After a while, I head back to the house. I open the door slowly. Everything is still quiet. I look at the piano and feel a slight pull in my chest. I don't like this feeling. It's like I want to get closer, but I'm afraid. I make myself walk into the kitchen. I rummage around for something to eat. I find some cans of beans and a box of crackers. I open them and eat standing at the counter. I keep one ear out for any sound from the living room. Nothing. The quiet makes me uneasy. I wish there was some noise, maybe a radio or a TV. There isn't. Just the faint hum of the fridge. In the afternoon, I sit on the couch again. I watch the piano from across the room. I notice details now. The scratches on the lid form strange patterns. The keys have yellow stains. One of them is chipped at the corner. It's an ugly piano, honestly, but I feel drawn to it. My hands sweat just from looking at it. I don't dare to touch it, though. My stomach is tight. I keep swallowing, as if I have a lump in my throat. When evening comes, I think about leaving. Maybe I can drive to a motel in the nearest town. I step outside to check my car. The tires look fine. The engine starts. But for some reason, I feel like I can't leave yet. It's not a logical reason. I just feel a pressure in my chest when I think about going. I turn off the car and go back inside. I tell myself I'll stay one more night and then decide. That night, I barely eat. I sit at the small dining table, chewing on bread and cheese. The single light bulb over my head flickers sometimes. The house is too quiet. I think I hear faint notes again, but it might be my imagination. Around 9, I stand up and look at the piano. My heart beats faster. I walk toward it, my legs shaking a bit. I sit on the dining chair right in front of the keyboard. I stare at the keys. I move my hands above them, but I don't press anything. My palms are sweaty. Suddenly, I feel a slight vibration under my fingertips. The keys seem to move up an inch like they're breathing. I hear a low whisper. It's my name. My heart thuds. My throat feels tight. I jerk my hands away, stand up, and back away from the piano. The whisper stops. The vibrations stop. I'm panting. My forehead is damp. I stumble to the bedroom and lock the door. I put a chair under the doorknob. My heart is still racing. I try to sleep, but the music starts again in the middle of the night. It's louder this time. The melody is slow, but the volume seems to swell. I hear the whisper calling me. My name repeats over and over. My ears ring. I cover my head with the pillow, but the sound seeps through. My breathing is ragged. My chest feels tight. My body is tense. I feel a pressure in my temples. I can't take it. I get up, unlock the door, and rush into the living room. The keys are pressing themselves down. I see them move in the dim light. The sound is unmistakable. The piano is playing alone. The whisper hovers above it like air forced through a crack. I shout at it to stop. My voice shakes. The music dies. The whisper fades. I stand there, trembling. My arms tingle. My eyes sting. I stare at the piano, feeling something like anger and fear mixed together. My fists clench. I walk into the kitchen, grab a flashlight from my bag, and return to the living room. I shine the beam onto the piano. Dust particles float in the light. The piano just sits there, silent. I approach it with hesitant steps. My heart hammers in my chest. I lift the lid and peer inside. The strings and hammers look old and worn. Nothing seems unusual. No wires attached. No hidden speakers. I close the lid, trying to stay calm, but my nerves are shot. My body is shaky. My mind keeps replaying that whispered voice. It felt personal, like it was speaking right into my ear. I wonder if this piano belongs to some ghost. I wonder if there's a story behind it. Maybe I can check the local records or talk to the caretaker. I hesitate, though. Part of me wants to just smash the piano to pieces or drag it outside. But I'm not sure if that's the right solution. What if that makes things worse? What if destroying it won't stop the voice? I pace around the living room, shining the flashlight on the walls, the floor, the furniture. Nothing else seems odd. The rest of the house is normal. It's just this piano. The caretaker never warned me about it. Maybe he didn't know. Or maybe he assumed I wouldn't notice. I chew my lower lip, trying to think of a plan. My gut tells me to find out more before I do anything drastic. The next morning I drive to the small town about 10 miles away. I go to a cafe and order coffee. I ask the owner if he knows anything about the old house I'm staying in. He shrugs, says it's been in the area for decades, and that many people rent it for vacations. I mention the piano. He raises an eyebrow and says he's heard there's a piano, but he doesn't know the story. I sense he's not hiding anything. He genuinely doesn't know. I thank him and leave. I walk around town, hoping to find someone else who might know more. Most people just say the house is old and the piano has been there for a long time. After a few hours, I return to the house. Everything looks the same. I feel uneasy opening the front door. When I step inside, the piano is silent. I feel a chill in my stomach anyway. I decide to open every drawer and closet to see if there are any old records or letters. I find nothing relevant. Just dusty manuals, an old phone book, and random papers that don't mention the piano. By evening, I sit on the couch again, trying to keep my nerves steady. I think about my options. I either investigate more or destroy the piano. I don't have a clue how to investigate further. I already tried asking people in town. No one knows anything. Maybe I can call the caretaker and ask him. But it's late, and I don't want to deal with that conversation right now. I lean my head back and close my eyes for a moment. The piano plays a single note. I jolt upright. My heart kicks into high gear. I see the key rise and fall by itself. That whisper comes back, very soft, almost gentle. It's calling my name again. My eyes start to water, and I wipe them quickly with my sleeve. My hands feel clammy. The room is warm, but my skin is cold. I step closer to the piano. Each step feels heavy. I can hear the boards under my feet creak. The whisper grows louder. The note repeats a slow pattern. My ears pick up my name embedded in that low hiss. I'm inches from the piano now. My breath is shallow. My pulse throbs in my neck. I feel compelled to place my hands on the keys. The voice in my head tells me not to, but my arms move anyway. I rest my fingers on the keys. They vibrate under my touch. The music stops for a moment, like it's waiting. Then my right index finger presses a key on its own. I feel a force guiding it. A low note rings out. My chest tightens. I try to pull my hand away, but it feels stuck. Another key moves under my middle finger. A chord forms. My heart pounds. I force myself to yank my hands back. I stumble away and grab a tall wooden stool by the dining table. My thoughts race. I'm breathing hard. I lift the stool, muscles tense, and swing it at the piano. The stool cracks against the side, leaving a dent. The piano emits a low groan like wood under pressure. I swing again, striking the lid. Splinters fly. The whisper turns into a hiss. I feel a sharp pain in my ears like they're popping. My eyes water again. The room feels heavy and oppressive. I drop the stool. My arms ache. The piano is damaged. The lid cracked, some of the keys chipped. But it still looks intact. The whisper is gone. The hiss is gone. I stand there, panting, sweat dripping down my neck. My eyes are fixed on the broken wood. My entire body trembles with adrenaline. I don't know if I just made things worse or if I finally ended this nightmare. My throat feels raw. I pick up the stool and drag it away, trying to calm my breathing. The piano remains silent. I stare at it for a long minute. I decide I need to leave, at least for the night. I grab my bag, my car keys, and head out the door. I don't bother turning off the lights. My heart is still pounding when I sit behind the wheel. I start the engine and pull away from that house. As I drive down the empty country road, I don't hear any music. The only sound is the engine and my ragged breathing. I keep checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking behind me, but there's nothing. My shoulders begin to relax a bit as I put distance between me and that house. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe I'll call the caretaker in the morning. Maybe I'll never set foot in that place again. Right now, I just want to get away. I grip the steering wheel tight. My hands still feel shaky, and my ears are ringing slightly. I focus on the road ahead, the dark sky, and the headlights cutting through the night. That piano can stay there, broken or not. I'm done listening to its voice. I moved into this old house a few weeks ago. I didn't notice anything strange at first. I was focused on getting all my boxes inside, setting up my bedroom, and trying to make the place feel like home. The house had a basement, and I knew there were some leftover items down there from the previous owner. But I pushed the idea of cleaning it out to the back of my mind. I didn't feel like dealing with someone else's junk on my first day. On my second night, I decided to check the basement. The door was heavy and the hinges squeaked. The steps creaked under my weight as I went down. The air felt damp, and my flashlight beam caught thick dust swirling around. The basement was crowded with old chairs, boxes of random papers, a couple of broken lamps, and a dresser missing one of its drawers. I saw cobwebs in the corners. The walls looked like stone blocks. It felt cold, and I smelled a musty odor. There was a sense of something old down there, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I spent about half an hour walking around, pushing aside some chairs and checking if anything was worth keeping. I found a few tools, a hammer that still looked usable, and a rusted metal pipe. Then my flashlight revealed a small hole in the far wall. It was about the size of a quarter, maybe a bit bigger. I leaned forward, trying to see if it led anywhere. I heard a faint hissing sound like a soft wind passing through a narrow gap. It was constant, never rising or falling in pitch. It reminded me of air escaping from somewhere. I put my ear closer and felt a slight breeze against my face. I stood there for a moment, trying to figure out where that breeze could be coming from. There was no obvious vent or window. I decided it wasn't a big deal and went back upstairs. I told myself I'd come back later to see if I could plug it up. I didn't want to get into a detailed repair job right away. I had unpacking to do, and the basement made me feel uneasy. Something about that hissing sound felt odd, but I told myself it was just air moving in old cracks. The next few days were normal. I worked on organizing my living room, setting up the couch and TV, and buying groceries. At night, though, I kept thinking about the basement. I wondered why that hole was there. I also wondered why the previous owner left so much junk. One evening, I went down again, determined to do a more thorough inspection. I wanted to see if there were any leaks or signs of pests. I walked to the far wall and pointed my flashlight at the hole. The hissing sound was still there, steady. I knelt down and tried to look inside. The opening was so small that I couldn't see much, just darkness. I felt a mild chill against my face. I reached out to feel around the edges of the hole. The stone was cold. I tried to shine my flashlight inside, but the hole turned or curved after a short distance, and I couldn't see past that bend. For a second, I thought I saw a hint of movement. My heart thumped in my chest. I told myself it was probably dust, or my own breath reflecting the light. Still, I pulled back, feeling my stomach tighten. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept replaying that moment in my head. Did I really see something move, or was I imagining it? Around midnight, I walked downstairs just to assure myself everything was fine. I didn't plan on going into the basement, but I couldn't resist. I flipped on the light in the hallway and opened the basement door. The darkness at the bottom of the stairs gave me a weird feeling, like it was looking back at me. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I stepped onto the first stair. My foot made a loud creak, which seemed to echo. I went down slowly. The hissing sound was there, but it felt quieter than before. The overhead bulb in the basement flickered. I swallowed and forced myself to walk over to the hole. I leaned in. It was pitch black. Then, for a split second, I thought I saw an eye staring at me. It was just a small circle of reflected light. I jerked backward, hitting an old chair. I stifled a gasp. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my temples. I forced the flashlight beam toward the hole, but by the time I focused on it, I saw nothing. The hissing continued as usual, and the hole looked empty. I stood there, breathing heavily, feeling my palms sweat. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe the reflection of my flashlight on the stone made me think there was an eye. I shook my head and went back upstairs. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that small circle staring at me through the darkness. Over the next few days, I tried to push it to the back of my mind. I went to work, came home, ate dinner, and tried to keep myself busy. But I felt drawn to the basement. I thought about sealing up the hole with cement or stuffing some rags inside. But I also felt this urge to see if something was really there. It was an uncomfortable mix of fear and curiosity. One night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept tossing and turning. Around 2 a.m., I decided to go down there. I grabbed a flashlight and my phone. I walked quietly even though I was alone. I reached the basement door and paused. I felt goosebumps on my arms. My breathing was shallow. I opened the door and stepped onto the stairs. The basement felt colder than before. The light bulb overhead seemed dimmer. I aimed my flashlight around, seeing the same old furniture and piled up boxes. Then I pointed the beam toward the far wall. The hole was there. The hissing sound was more noticeable this time, like it got a bit louder at night. I walked toward it, feeling the hair on my neck stand up. I knelt down and brought my eye close to the hole. My flashlight was off. I wanted my eyes to adjust to the darkness, hoping I could see inside without reflection. I waited, listening to my own breathing mix with that hiss. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I kept staring. Then I saw movement again, a slight shift of light or shadow. My throat went dry. I forced myself to stay there watching. After a few seconds, I saw an eye. It was definitely an eye. I couldn't make out the color, but it looked human. It blinked once. I felt my pulse spike. I jumped back. The old floorboard scraped under my feet. When I looked again, there was only darkness. I breathed heavily. My mouth felt bitter. I wanted to scream, but I held it in. I flicked on my flashlight and aimed it straight at the hole. Nothing. Just that endless dark. I pressed my hand to my forehead, which was covered in sweat. I thought about calling someone, but what would I say? That I saw an eye in a hole in my basement wall? It sounded absurd. Nobody would believe me. I stood there, flashlight shaking in my hand, debating whether to reach out and feel the hole again. I decided against it and went back upstairs. I couldn't sleep that night. My stomach was tense and my chest felt tight. The next morning I drank coffee, but I could barely taste it. I kept thinking about that eye. I knew I wasn't imagining it. The blinking was too real. I wondered if there was some hidden room or old tunnel behind that wall. Maybe someone was squatting back there. The idea of a living person watching me felt even worse than a ghost. I planned to investigate more, but during the day I convinced myself it was some kind of reflection. Then night came, and my fear returned. After 3 nights of bad sleep, I decided to block the hole. I bought a small container of spackling paste and a putty knife. I also grabbed a can of expanding foam. When I got home from work, I went down to the basement with the intention of sealing it. I cleared the area around the hole and kneeled in front of it. I could hear the hissing sound. My hand trembled as I reached out. I felt the cold stone. I started to spray foam into the hole. The hiss changed pitch for a moment, then resumed its steady tone. I waited a few seconds for the foam to expand. Then I pressed spackling paste over it, smoothing it out. When I was done, the hole was sealed. I felt some relief, but I also felt tense, like I was covering something alive. I let out a shaky breath and stood up. I looked around the basement, as if expecting something to jump out from behind the boxes. Nothing moved. I turned off the lights and went upstairs. That night I slept better. No nightmares. I woke up thinking maybe I'd solved the problem, but 2 days later, I went back to the basement to grab a hammer. The moment I stepped off the last stair, I felt my heart sink. The foam and paste had been pushed out. The hole was open again. The spackling paste lay cracked on the floor, and the foam was torn, like something forced it from the inside. The hissing sound was louder than before. My hands shook. I felt my face flush. I walked over, stepping carefully around the debris. My throat felt dry. My mind raced. I crouched down and stared at the opening. It looked slightly bigger. I reached out to touch the edges. The stone felt rough. I tried to press a piece of foam back in, but it just fell out. My pulse sped up. I could hear my heart thudding against my rib cage. I turned and hurried upstairs, locking the basement door behind me. That night, I heard soft scratching noises from below. It sounded like fingernails on stone. Then came the hiss, faint but distinct. I could feel it vibrating in my chest. I sat on my couch, gripping my phone. I didn't want to go down there. I felt sweat forming on my forehead. My body was on edge. Every hair on my arm stood up. I tried turning on the TV, but I couldn't focus. The scratching kept coming, sometimes stopping for a minute, then starting again. Eventually, I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, it was morning. The scratching had stopped and everything felt quiet. I had an ache in my neck from sleeping in a bad position. My eyes burned from lack of rest. But I had to go check the basement. It felt like a horrible chore, but I couldn't ignore it. I walked downstairs with my flashlight, my teeth clenched. I opened the basement door slowly. My heart fluttered in my chest. I flicked on the basement light. It flickered, but stayed on. I walked over to the far wall. The hole was still open. My patch job lay scattered on the floor. I felt a chill as I stared at it. The hissing continued, steady as before. Then, without warning, I saw something shift in the dark behind the hole. I froze. My hand holding the flashlight twitched. I bent forward just a few inches, trying to see more. A shape moved back, disappearing from view. My stomach clenched, and I thought I might throw up. I stood up straight, struggling to keep my breathing steady. I decided to back away and call a professional. Maybe I needed someone to break open the wall and see if there was a hidden space or a crack leading outside. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was behind that hole wasn't just a raccoon or a snake. The shape I saw was too large, and that eye I spotted before looked human. I walked upstairs, locked the basement door, and grabbed my phone. I started dialing a contractor's number, but I paused. What if he broke the wall and found nothing? Or worse, what if he found something I didn't want to face? My mind reeled with the possibilities. I just stood there, phone in hand, feeling my heart racing again. I felt trapped. If I ignored it, the hole would stay open. That presence would keep watching me. If I investigated, I might uncover something that would haunt me even more. I paced around my living room, picking at my nails. The memory of that eye blinking stayed in my head. It felt like a violation. Something was staring right at me, and I couldn't see it fully. The uncertainty ate at me. The tension in my chest made it hard to breathe. I kept glancing at the basement door, half expecting it to burst open. I ended up not calling anyone that day. I guess I was afraid of seeming crazy. Who would believe me if I said I saw a blinking eye behind the wall? Instead, I sat on my couch, listening to every little sound the house made. Eventually, I ate a sandwich without tasting it. I tried watching TV again, but my mind was stuck on that hole. Night came, and the scratching resumed. It was soft, irregular, like someone running their fingers over stone. The hiss was there too, steadier than my own breath. Around midnight, I was so tense that my shoulders hurt. I walked to the basement door, put my hand on the knob, and just stood there. My legs felt weak. I stared at the doorknob, thinking about going down one more time. Maybe I could try to speak through the hole, ask if someone was there. But the thought of hearing a voice answer made my skin crawl. I decided to push my couch against the basement door. It wasn't going to stop anyone, but it gave me a small sense of security. Then I tried to sleep in my bedroom. I turned on every light in the house except the basement. My heart was still pounding, and I could barely close my eyes. I lay there gripping my blankets, my mind buzzing. I kept thinking about that eye, that shape in the darkness. I felt watched, even with the door and a couch between me and the basement. My lips were dry, and I licked them constantly. My chest felt tight, and I took short, quick breaths. I felt beads of sweat on my face. My thoughts were scattered. Half of me wanted to grab a sledgehammer and seal the hole with a 10-foot wall. The other half wanted to run away and never come back. That's where I am now. I'm sitting here writing this down. I haven't gone back to the basement since last night. The hissing hasn't stopped. I still hear it faintly through the floorboards. My stomach is in knots, and my hands are shaking. I keep glancing at the time, waiting for morning light, although I don't know what difference it makes. Part of me wants to confront it, to pry that hole open and see what's back there. Another part wants to seal the basement door for good. I have no clue what I'll do. All I know is that the hole is there and something is behind it watching me. And I hate the feeling that I'll never really see what's staring back. But I can't forget it's there. And now I can't ignore it, no matter how hard I try. I remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong. I was at a coffee shop near my office, standing in line with my shoulders tense and my eyes on the menu board. The place was crowded, and the baristas called out names every few seconds. I heard someone behind me mention a canceled meeting from 3 days earlier. That grabbed my attention because I recognized the voice but didn't see the person. I glanced around, but nobody looked familiar. My heart thumped. I tried to ignore it. I picked up my coffee and left without looking back. A few days later, I went to the same coffee shop. As soon as I stepped inside, I heard that same voice. It repeated details about an office argument I'd had with my manager last week. I felt a buzzing in my ears and a cold knot in my stomach. I surveyed the room. No one seemed to be talking about work. People were either on their phones or chatting about the weather. I turned around and walked out, my coffee left untouched. My mouth felt dry and my palms were sweaty. I told myself I was just tired. I kept hearing the same voice in different public spaces. Sometimes the words came from behind me, sometimes from a corner of the room. They never matched any mouth I could see. Each time my chest got tight, my temples pulsed. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination. I made an appointment with an ear specialist. He checked my hearing, told me everything was normal, and suggested I might be under stress. I thanked him and left. I felt like I was going crazy. One afternoon, I visited a bookstore across town. It's a large place with 2 floors, always filled with people flipping through books or studying at small tables. I hoped to distract myself by looking for a gift for a friend. I wandered to the fiction section. As I reached for a book, I heard a whisper near my left ear. It said my name, followed by a short laugh. I turned so fast I nearly dropped the book. A stranger stood a few steps away holding a notebook. He was busy writing something. I stared at him, my breathing uneven. He didn't react. I slowly moved toward him. The whisper came again, this time from the opposite side. It made a rude comment about me, something I'd heard someone say about me months earlier at a party. My neck felt hot. I left the bookstore, my hands shaking. On the subway ride home, I sat against the window. The train was crowded. People stood shoulder to shoulder, and I tried to block out their conversations. That's when I heard a new set of voices. They sounded like they were from last week or last month, complaining about the late train service, describing a lost phone, joking about a sports game. It wasn't just one voice. It was a mix of random conversations, all blending together but somehow clear in my head. My eyes locked on the floor. My cheeks felt warm. I thought I was losing my mind. Over the next few weeks, the echoes grew stronger. They weren't just random bits of small talk. They included personal secrets. Some were about money problems. Some were about relationship drama. I felt sick. I didn't want to know these things. I tried wearing headphones, turning up the volume on whatever music I could find. It helped for a few days, but then the voices seemed to push through the music. Their volume would rise in places like restaurants or busy lobbies, and I would feel a buzzing pressure around my ears. I started to avoid going out. I ordered food online. I skipped social events. My friends wondered what was wrong. I said I was busy with work. In reality, I was terrified of hearing more voices. I would lie on my couch, hoping for peace. But my apartment felt claustrophobic after a while, so I'd step outside for some air. That's when the problem got worse. I realized it wasn't just huge crowds. The voices stayed in any enclosed space. A quiet elevator at midnight could still hold faint whispers from earlier in the day. A locked restroom at a gas station could have a single echo that repeated a random comment from hours before. One night, I tried to grab dinner at a small diner 2 blocks from my place. It was nearly empty. I saw only a waiter wiping down the counter and a couple eating at a corner booth. I took a seat at a table near the window. The fluorescent light flickered. My stomach growled. The place smelled like coffee and old grease. As the waiter walked toward me, I heard a muffled conversation floating in the air. It sounded like a complaint about a missing ring. The voice was agitated. I looked around. Nobody was speaking. The couple in the corner was silent, both staring at their phones. The waiter was busy with the menu. Then the voice got louder. It said, "He stole it. I know he did," and ended with an angry hiss. I felt goosebumps on my arms. I forced myself to order a sandwich. My voice shook a bit. The waiter didn't seem to notice. As I waited, I heard different voices repeating phrases about stolen items, overdue bills, and regrets. I stared at the table, trying to steady my breathing. I felt pressure in my chest. My heartbeat was heavy. By the time my food arrived, I could barely take a bite without feeling nauseous. The waiter asked if I was okay. I just nodded. I paid and left most of the sandwich untouched. On my walk home, I kept my eyes on the sidewalk. My legs felt weak. The next day, I tried to explain the situation to my friend Marcus. We met in my apartment so I could avoid going anywhere else. He listened, arms crossed, eyebrows raised. I told him I kept hearing old conversations in public places, like the rooms themselves were replaying everything that happened there. He asked if maybe I was tired, or if I had some medical problem. I told him about the ear doctor. I told him about the medication I tried for anxiety. Nothing helped. Marcus suggested therapy. I nodded, but I felt a jolt of anger. I didn't want someone labeling me crazy. Eventually, I gave in. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Hoffman. She asked a lot of questions about my personal life, my family, my job. I tried to explain the voices in straightforward terms. She took notes and told me I might be experiencing auditory hallucinations triggered by stress. She recommended relaxation techniques. She told me to document each occurrence in a journal. I tried. I wrote down dates, times, places, and the specific words I heard. But the more I documented, the more details I noticed. The voices got clearer. They started calling my name more often, like they knew I was listening. One evening, I decided I couldn't stay isolated forever. I went to a small pizza place near my therapist's office. I sat near the door, hoping to avoid feeling trapped. At first, it was quiet. A TV on the wall played the news without sound and a ceiling fan creaked. Then, as I waited for my pizza, I heard faint comments drifting through the room. Complaints about long work shifts, regrets about wasted time, jokes about incompetent co-workers. They kept overlapping, as if they had all been recorded in that place at different times. I gripped the edge of the table. My chest felt tight and my throat was dry. I stared at the pizza when it arrived, trying to tune out the voices. But then one of them hissed, "He can hear us," and I felt a surge of panic in my stomach. My hands shook. The slices tasted like cardboard in my mouth. I left the pizza place with half the pie in a box and went straight home. For the next few days, I refused to leave my apartment again. I started sleeping at odd hours. I'd wake up in the afternoon, stay awake till dawn, then pass out from exhaustion. At one point, the isolation was too strong. I needed groceries. I forced myself to visit a small market a few blocks away. Inside, the lighting was dim and the aisles were cramped. I pushed a cart, grabbing cereal, milk, and frozen meals. I tried to avoid eye contact with anyone. My hands trembled. I kept expecting to hear a whisper, a conversation, something. I went through 3 aisles in silence, feeling a tiny bit of relief. But then, near the produce section, I heard voices describing arguments about spoiled fruit from the previous day. I heard a heated exchange about someone slipping near the lettuce stand. The cart handle felt slippery in my hands. I hurried to the checkout line. It was empty except for a single cashier. When I reached the register, I heard laughter behind me. It was the same laugh I had heard in the bookstore, the same one that made a rude comment about me. My scalp prickled. My face felt hot. I stayed quiet, paid for my groceries, and rushed home. That night I sat on my couch, staring at the blank TV screen. My legs felt heavy. My chest felt tight. I considered leaving the city. Maybe a place with fewer people would be quieter. But then I remembered this seemed to happen anywhere there were enclosed spaces. I thought about the possibility that open air might be the only way to avoid the echoes. Maybe a deserted countryside. Then I wondered if the voices would follow me into any building, no matter how empty it had been in the past. I felt a headache coming. My shoulders ached. I called Marcus and told him everything. He tried to reason with me. He suggested I test smaller spots like a private office or an abandoned shed to see if the echoes only occurred in places with lots of past activity. I decided to try an old storage room in my apartment building. It was at the end of a dark hallway, rarely used. The door creaked when I opened it. I stepped inside, flicked on a single overhead light, and waited. Dust floated in the air. I smelled old cardboard and rust. For a minute, I heard nothing. I felt my shoulders relax. Then I caught a faint murmur. It was about some missing boxes. It was followed by a complaint about a leaky pipe. I pressed my back against a wall, feeling my heart beat faster. I realized there must have been a caretaker here at some point, complaining to a coworker. I turned off the light and left. So much for that idea. Over the next few days, I avoided contact with anyone. I sat in my living room, flipping through channels, pacing around, trying not to think. But the echoes started showing up in my dreams. I would hear random bits of old conversations and I'd jolt awake in a cold sweat. My shirt would stick to my back. I'd grab a towel, wipe my face, and stay awake until sunrise. At my next therapy session, Dr. Hoffman asked me if I believed this was something supernatural. She'd noticed I was no longer convinced it was just hallucinations. I hesitated. I felt my hands curl into fists on my lap. I admitted I couldn't explain it logically. Dr. Hoffman looked at me with concern but didn't argue. She encouraged me to keep writing things down, to keep track of any patterns. The patterns were obvious. Any enclosed public space carried the voices of its past occupants. They weren't illusions. They repeated words that I recognized, events that matched reality, secrets nobody had told me. They teased me. They called out my name, sometimes in mocking tones, sometimes in warning. Each time I felt my heart hammering. My throat would go dry. My vision would blur at the edges. I'd stumble out of the building searching for fresh air. I tried explaining all this to Marcus again. He listened, arms folded. He didn't say I was insane. He offered to walk with me into a busy place to see if we could both hear it. We tried. We went to a large shopping center. The moment we stepped into a clothing store, I heard the echoes. They talked about returns, about stolen items, about frustrations with the manager. I glanced at Marcus. He just looked confused. He heard none of it. I felt dizzy. My head pounded. I left him at the store, mumbled an excuse, and hurried home alone. At that point, I realized I might be stuck with this. Maybe I was chosen, though I hated that word. It felt too dramatic. But I couldn't deny the sense that the voices wanted me to hear them. They called out. They repeated secrets. They whispered my name. They teased me. They warned me. And no matter how much I tried to block them, they pushed through everything: music, earplugs, my own thoughts. I started experimenting with short visits to public places, trying to remain calm as the echoes washed over me. I'd enter a grocery store, stand near the frozen foods, and count my breaths. I'd focus on the cold air from the freezers. I'd listen to the voices describe old complaints about freezer burn or out-of-stock items. My jaw would clench. I'd sweat, but I tried to stay there for at least a minute. Then I'd walk out, heart pounding. I repeated this at a laundromat, a gas station bathroom, a fast food drive-thru. The result was always the same: old snippets of conversation, personal secrets, petty arguments, laughter, gossip. After several weeks of this, I managed to endure it without running outside immediately. I couldn't stop the voices, but I stopped panicking every time. I just let them run their course. My throat would still go dry, and my skin would still prickle, but I kept myself from collapsing into fear. Now I live with it every day. I still see Dr. Hoffman. She still calls it a stress-induced phenomenon, but I don't believe that anymore. I don't claim to understand it. I just accept that certain walls hold on to every word ever spoken, and I'm the only one who can hear them. The voices follow me, they call me names, they mock my fears. Sometimes I hear them revealing details about other people's lives. It's a constant reminder that the past never truly goes away. I haven't found a cure. I haven't found a way to make it stop. But I go to work again, I ride the subway, and I buy groceries in person. I still hear the laughter and the whispers. I still feel that knot in my chest whenever I step through a door. But I keep moving. I have a life to live, and I won't let these echoes lock me inside my apartment forever. If I was chosen, or if I'm just cursed, it doesn't matter. I refuse to hide. That's how I survive. I still remember the first time I noticed those dark stains on the ceiling in my attic. I had been living in this house for about 5 years, and I'd never paid much attention to the attic's condition. I used it for storage, mostly old furniture, empty boxes, and a few suitcases. I went up there one night to look for a box of winter clothes, and that's when I spotted them. At first, I thought they were just water stains or maybe mold. The odd thing was how they seemed to form patterns that I couldn't explain. It looked like overlapping shapes, almost like silhouettes of people. That caught my eye. I thought it was just a trick of the light. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and walked around trying to see if there was some leakage or a crack in the roof. I couldn't find anything obvious. The stains were dry to the touch. They didn't smell like mold or damp wood. I left the attic that night feeling a bit uneasy. I couldn't ignore the shape of those patterns. They gave me this nagging sense that someone had been up there painting them. But when I looked closer, I saw they weren't painted. The discoloration was soaked into the wood, like it had been there for a long time. I tried to tell myself it was just a stain that happened to look like a human outline. Maybe multiple stains, one on top of the other. I went back downstairs and tried to focus on other things. The next day I went to work as usual. My job is mostly desk work in an office. I spent the day thinking about documents and emails, but every time I had a free moment, I kept picturing the shapes on the attic ceiling. By the time I got home, I felt a pull to go upstairs and look again. I tossed my coat on the couch and headed straight for the attic door. I climbed the wooden steps, which creaked under my weight. Once I reached the top, I pulled the light switch. The bulb overhead flickered before staying on. The stains were still there, but they seemed a bit darker this time. My heart pounded. I walked right underneath them and stared. It felt like they were changing the longer I looked. One moment, they looked like the outline of a tall figure with broad shoulders. Then, as I shifted my position, they warped into two smaller shapes standing side by side. I blinked a few times, thinking it might be my eyes playing tricks. I held my breath, waiting to see if there was any movement. For a second, I swore I saw the shapes tilt, like a person turning their head. I stepped back, and a cold shiver ran through my arms. I felt a rush of panic. My gut reaction was to flick off the light and back down the stairs. The moment the light went out, the attic went dark except for a bit of moonlight coming through the small window. I stayed still, trying to let my eyes adjust. That's when I heard faint footsteps above my head, but there was nothing above me. The attic was the top floor of the house. No extra level, no hidden room. Yet I heard shuffling, like old shoes dragging across a floor. My scalp tingled. I pressed my hands against my ears, but I could still hear the steps. They were slow and deliberate. Then they stopped. I grabbed the light cord and pulled. The bulb lit up again. The footsteps stopped and everything was quiet. My heart hammered so loudly I could barely think. I checked the ceiling. The stains were still there. They looked unchanged. I wondered if I was going crazy. I walked backward toward the stairs, keeping my eyes on the ceiling. Then I hurried downstairs, closed the attic door, and leaned against the wall. I tried to calm my breathing. My hands were shaking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling in my bedroom, thinking about what I'd heard. It didn't make sense. Maybe there was some animal living in the roof space, but that would mean a raccoon or a large rat. That wouldn't explain the shape of those stains. It also wouldn't explain why they seemed to shift in front of my eyes. My pulse pounded every time I pictured that weird movement. The next evening, I forced myself back into the attic, determined to get a solid explanation. I brought a flashlight with fresh batteries, and I made sure the overhead light was working. I also took my phone to record a video. I felt silly, but I wanted proof of what I was seeing. I walked around the attic, recording the ceiling. The stains looked darker in the phone's camera. I zoomed in, and it almost looked like the outline of a face. Then the shape morphed, and I saw something resembling a side profile. I pointed the camera away for a second, took a deep breath, and aimed it back. They changed again, forming a group of figures, as if a crowd was standing around a table. I felt a chill on the back of my neck. The air in the attic got colder. My hand shook while holding the phone, and the video kept going out of focus. I tried turning off the overhead light to see if the flashlight would catch something different. The second I switched off the overhead light, my phone's flashlight reflected off the ceiling. Then I heard a soft thump above my head. I swung the flashlight around, scanning the corners of the attic. Nothing. I stood there, listening. That's when I heard low murmurs, like a conversation in another room. But there was no other room. I aimed the phone at the ceiling again, and the silhouettes seemed to be moving. They were turning, shifting positions like actors in a play. It looked like they were wearing old-fashioned clothing. I saw one figure raise an arm, pointing at something. I saw another shape bow its head. My throat felt tight. I was sweating, but the air felt cold on my skin. I tried to speak, but my voice shook. "Hello?" The murmuring paused, then started again. I couldn't understand the words. It wasn't a language I recognized. It was muffled, like hearing neighbors through a wall. My heart thudded. I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in. My stomach turned and I had this urge to run. Instead, I kept standing there, holding the phone up. I wanted to record something real. I wanted to prove I wasn't imagining it. After a few minutes, the murmurs died down. The footsteps faded. The silhouettes stopped moving. I backed away and went downstairs. I collapsed on my living room couch, phone still clutched in my hand. I played back the video, but it was too dark and my hand was shaky. I could barely see anything. There were flickers of some shapes, but it wasn't clear. The audio was mostly static, with maybe a faint rumble. Nothing concrete. I felt a wave of frustration. I wanted to show someone, but I knew how it would sound. I have stains on my attic ceiling that move and talk. People would think I was crazy or seeking attention. Over the next few days, I tried to avoid the attic. Each time I walked past that door, I felt a flutter of nerves. My curiosity wouldn't let me ignore it forever. On Friday night, I decided to go back in. I took a stepladder with me, planning to get a closer look at the ceiling. When I got up there, I unfolded the ladder under the largest stain and climbed up. The wood looked old, but the surface was smooth. I pressed my hand to it. It was cool to the touch, like stone in a basement. I leaned in, trying to see if there was some indentation or irregular texture. Nothing. I shifted my flashlight around, trying to get a better view. That's when the silhouette seemed to stretch, forming a tall figure. Its head was right above mine. My heart fluttered. I felt a jolt of fear, like my body telling me to get down. I heard a whisper. It sounded like a breath against my ear. I nearly fell off the ladder. I scrambled down, and my foot slipped on the second step. I banged my elbow on the edge of a wooden chest. Pain shot through my arm. I cursed under my breath, feeling my pulse pounding in my ears. I stood there, rubbing my elbow, staring at the stain. It stayed in that tall figure form for a few seconds, then shifted back into something else, like multiple figures grouped together. I grabbed the ladder and folded it up, then hurried back downstairs, arms still throbbing. In the bathroom, I checked for bruises. My elbow was red. I splashed some cold water on my face. I felt foolish. Why was I putting myself through this? I could have called someone to check the roof or just covered the stains with paint. But I couldn't let it go. There was something there, and I wanted to know what it was. That night I barely slept. I kept hearing those faint whispers in my head. The attic door was closed, but I felt like there were eyes watching me from above. At around 3 a.m., and I heard soft creaking sounds coming from the attic. My bedroom is right below it. I lay there wide awake, staring at the dark ceiling in my room, feeling every hair on my body stand on end. The sounds came and went, like someone pacing in circles. I pulled the covers up to my chin and waited it out until morning. Over the weekend, I tried to distract myself with errands and chores. I cleaned the garage, washed my car, and did laundry. But every quiet moment brought me back to the attic. By Sunday night, I decided I had to do one last investigation. I prepared a small lamp, a flashlight, and a voice recorder. I went up there, closed the hatch behind me, and set the lamp on an old table. It provided a steady glow, enough for me to see the ceiling clearly. I placed the voice recorder near the ladder. I looked up and waited. Nothing happened for several minutes. Then I saw the silhouettes move again. They formed shapes of people standing in a row like they were waiting for something. My skin felt clammy. I wiped my palms on my jeans. My chest tightened. I heard the murmurs rise, then fade. I picked up the voice recorder and turned it on. I didn't say anything, I just held it up. The murmurs grew louder, but they were still muffled. It sounded like an old gathering, maybe in a large room. I saw one silhouette step forward, though it had no features, just a shape. Another silhouette turned away as if walking in another direction. My throat was dry. I walked around the attic, trying to see if the shadows would follow. They stayed in place, shifting and twisting on the ceiling. At one point, I heard a loud knock right above my head. It was like something was striking the wood. I almost dropped the recorder. My heart pounded. I felt sweat rolling down my back. I stood there, rooted to the spot, trying to keep the recorder aimed at the source of the sound. Another knock, then silence. The silhouettes froze. as if they had been paused. I glanced at the lamp's switch. I considered turning it off to see if the darkness would make things clearer, but I was too scared of what might happen if I did. I left the lamp on. I kept the voice recorder running for a few more minutes, but nothing else happened. Finally, the silhouettes melted back into abstract stains. I turned off the recorder and lowered my arm, which was stiff from holding it up. I pressed stop and played it back. I heard my breath, the creaking of the floor, and a faint, low drone, but I couldn't make out specific voices or words. I stood there thinking about my situation. Part of me wanted to pack up and leave the house for a few days. Another part of me wanted to stay and figure this out. I'd never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural, but I couldn't deny what I'd seen. My logical side said there had to be an explanation, old water stains, my imagination, or stress from work. But my gut told me these scenes were real in some way. Maybe they were echoes of past events. Maybe they were a trick my brain was playing on me. Either way, I knew I couldn't keep living like this. I took a deep breath and left the attic. I flipped off the light, shut the door, and went downstairs. I sat at my kitchen table, resting my arms on the surface, trying to calm down. My mind was buzzing with questions. Was it safer to leave, or would I just be running away from something I needed to understand? I thought about getting a hotel room for a night or two, just to clear my head. But the idea of not knowing what was going on in my own attic bothered me more than the fear. I ended up sleeping on the couch that night, or at least trying to. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured those figures on the ceiling. I replayed the sound of footsteps and muffled voices. Around 2 a.m., I got up and double-checked that the attic door was still shut. I put a chair under the handle, hoping that would give me some peace of mind. I don't know what I'll do next. The stains aren't going away. They're still up there, and they change whenever I look at them for too long. The footsteps and whispers happen every time I turn off the lights. I don't have an answer. I'm torn between leaving the house for good or staying here until I unravel this mystery. Tonight I'm leaning towards staying, at least for a while. I'm not ready to give up on my own home, but part of me wonders how much longer I can handle the tension and the fear. I feel it in my stomach, in my chest. My hands shake when I think about those shifting shapes. For now, I'm here, in my living room, typing this out and watching the attic door. The air feels still and the night is quiet, but I know that if I go up there and turn off the light, those shadows will move again, and I'll hear those footsteps above my head, even though there's nothing but the roof beyond that ceiling. I don't know if it's my mind playing tricks on me or if something from long ago is trying to push through into the present. All I can do is wait and decide when to face it again. I don't know what I'll see next time, but I can't pretend it's not happening. My attic is the same as always, except for those stains. And those stains aren't fading. They're getting darker. I heard the first scratching sound on a Wednesday night around 2 in the morning. It was faint, like someone dragging their nails lightly across wood. I sat up in bed, listening. My heart pounded because I knew every corner of this house, and those noises weren't familiar. I turned on the lamp and walked to the hallway. The floor looked fine. No footprints, no scratches. Everything seemed normal under the light. I felt a little foolish, but I couldn't shake the unease. I went back to bed, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. The next morning, I examined the hallway. At first, I didn't notice anything. I ran my hand over the floorboards, searching for rough patches. Then I saw them. Thin lines in the wood, almost hidden by the grain. They looked like they'd been made by something with sharp claws. It reminded me of how a cat might scratch at a door, but the marks were longer, almost in parallel lines. I stared at them for a while, trying to understand how they got there. I don't own a cat, and I don't let animals into my house. The marks were also deeper than a typical scratch from a small pet. I felt a chill creep up my spine. I decided not to call anyone about it. Instead, I covered the lines with a rug. I told myself I would keep an eye on them, maybe measure them if they changed. but I still felt uneasy all day. That night, I stayed up later than usual. I watched TV in the living room. I wanted to stay alert in case the scratching happened again. Around midnight, I turned off the TV and sat there in the dark, listening. The room felt still, but I noticed a faint odor in the air. It smelled sharp, like rotten eggs or old matches. I tried to figure out if maybe there was a leak or something, but nothing seemed wrong with the gas line. I checked the stove, the windows, everything. The smell lingered, and it made me anxious. After about an hour, I went to bed, leaving the hallway light on. I woke up again to that same sound, but it was louder this time. It wasn't constant. It came in spurts, like something pausing and then scraping again. I opened the bedroom door, heart pounding, and looked into the hallway. I couldn't see anything. The light was still on and the corridor looked empty. The sound stopped the moment I stepped out. The smell of sulfur hit me again, making me cough. In the morning, I checked the floor. The old scratches looked deeper. They seemed fresh too, as if they'd just been made last night. I found new lines next to the old ones. My stomach twisted. The pattern made it look like something was crawling back and forth, leaving parallel grooves behind. I pressed my fingers into the marks. They were rough, each at least a quarter-inch deep. My pulse throbbed in my ears, and I felt a cold sweat forming on my forehead. I wondered if I was imagining it all, but I could feel the grooves clearly. I started losing sleep, worrying about these noises. During the day, I tried to keep myself busy. I went out to work as usual, took calls, ran errands. But every time I came home, I felt this tension in my chest. I kept thinking about that smell in the hallway and those scratches on the floor. I even bought some boards at the hardware store, planning to reinforce certain spots. But it didn't make sense to do that unless I was sure something was actually breaking in. I had no idea what I was dealing with. Night after night, the sounds got louder. At times, it sounded like something heavy scraping the floor. Other times, it was more like nails tapping quickly on the wood. I tried turning all the lights on, hoping that whatever it was would avoid the brightness. That didn't help. The noises came anyway, always between midnight and 3 in the morning. I would run into the hallway, switching lights on, and find nothing. The corridor was empty except for that acrid smell. It burned my nostrils and made me gag. One night I snapped. The scratching had started again, and I burst out of my bedroom shouting. My voice echoed in the hallway and my hands shook. I was furious and terrified at the same time. I demanded that whoever or whatever it was show itself. My heart hammered so hard that my chest felt tight. There was no response. The noise stopped. I stood there for a few minutes, breathing heavily, trying to steady myself. Then I smelled it again, that sulfur stench. It felt like it was right beside me, maybe behind me. I turned around, shining a flashlight into every corner, but saw nothing. I leaned against the wall, feeling sweat drip down my face. I went back to the bedroom and locked the door. Sleep came in brief bursts, filled with nightmares. I dreamed that something was crawling behind the walls, watching me, waiting for me to close my eyes. In the dreams, I would spin around and see a shape scuttling across the floor, but I could never make out its exact form. It was always just beyond the edge of my vision. I woke up each time with my heart racing. The bed sheets would be damp from my sweat. After a week of this, I started to think I should leave the house. But then I thought about the money I'd put into it. It was my home. I had nowhere else to go. I tried to talk to a friend about the noises, but I ended up feeling foolish. He asked if I was sure it wasn't just pipes or rodents. I couldn't prove anything. I realized I might look like I was losing my mind. I stopped bringing it up. A few days later, I decided to set up a camera in the hallway. It was just an old camcorder I had lying around. I placed it on a stool, pointing it at the scratched section of the floor. I let it record all night. That was the worst night so far. The scraping was so loud it seemed to come from inside my bedroom walls as well as the hallway. At times I thought I heard a soft growling, but every time I opened the bedroom door, the hallway was empty. I felt sweat trickling down my back and my throat was so dry I could barely swallow. The odor became overwhelming, like someone had spilled acid in the hallway. In the morning, I checked the recording. I skipped through hours of footage. I found nothing. The hallway was completely still. At one point, around 2:47 a.m., the audio picked up faint scraping. I saw a flicker in the frame, like a shadow crossing the lens. It was there for less than a second. It looked like it might have been a corner of a shape, but it moved too fast for me to make out any details. Then the smell hit me in broad daylight. It came from the floor like it was seeping through the wood. I felt nauseous just watching the video. I tried to rationalize everything, telling myself there had to be an explanation. But the longer this went on, the more terrified I got. I searched the attic and the crawl space for any sign of animals or forced entry. I checked the roof. I found nothing. Yet the scratches kept multiplying. Each day, the marks extended a little farther down the hallway, as if the creature or whatever it was had been exploring more of the house. I followed the trail of scratches up to my living room. Some lines started branching off toward the back door, but there were no footprints, no stray hair or fur, nothing that would tell me what I was dealing with. I started sleeping with all the lights on in the house. My electric bill soared, but I didn't care. Even with the lights on, the sounds came. I thought maybe if I stayed awake all night, I'd catch it in the act. But I couldn't keep my eyes open forever. When I drifted off, the noises began. I'd jolt awake, run to the hallway, and find fresh marks. The house felt like it wasn't mine anymore. It felt like I was just a guest, waiting for something to happen. One evening, I tried spreading flour on the floor to see if footprints appeared. I covered the entire hallway with a thin layer of flour before going to bed. At around 3 in the morning, I heard the scraping again. It was louder than before, almost like metal dragging on wood. I raced out of my room, flashlight in hand, and saw that the flour was disturbed. Something had moved across it, leaving narrow streaks. No footprints, no outline of paws or shoes, just these parallel lines running across the hallway, the same lines I'd been seeing in the wood. I followed them, shining my flashlight over every inch, but they led nowhere. They just stopped near the living room. The smell was suffocating, and my stomach churned. I tried to hold my breath, but it was impossible. My eyes watered, and I stumbled back to my bedroom. I felt dizzy. I locked the door, pressed my back against it, and tried to calm down. My heart was racing so fast it hurt. My muscles felt stiff, and a strong urge to vomit rose in my throat. After a while, the smell dissipated. I stayed on the floor, leaning against the door, until sunrise. Over the next few days, the nightmares got worse. I dreamed of corners in my house where the lights never reached. In these dreams, I'd see a glint of something in the darkness, like a pair of eyes or maybe claws. I'd wake up with my pulse pounding, my mouth dry, and sweat dripping down my forehead. The hallway floor started to look mangled. The scratches were everywhere now. Every morning I found new marks, deeper and angrier. I wondered if the entire floor would eventually get ripped up by this thing. I reached a breaking point one Saturday afternoon. I had been trying to ignore the problem, hoping it would go away, or at least stay in the hallway. But the marks spread into my office and my living room. I stood in my living room, staring at the floor, noticing a fresh path of scratches leading up to the window. My hands trembled. My stomach felt tight. The house smelled like sulfur, even during the day now. It felt like living in a constant state of dread. I walked around checking every room, searching for holes or cracks. I found nothing. I realized I didn't have any real control here. I sat on the couch and thought about leaving. I grabbed a piece of paper and started making a list of what I'd need to take if I left the house for good. I wrote down clothes, electronics, important documents, but I stopped halfway. The idea of abandoning the place felt wrong, but staying felt worse. My mind kept playing the same loop. Either I run and leave everything behind, or I stay and risk losing my sanity. I felt trapped and isolated. I checked my phone, but I couldn't think of anyone to call. I felt embarrassed, like nobody would believe me. So I just sat there waiting for night to fall, dreading the moment the sun went down. When darkness came, I turned on every light again. The smell intensified. It crept through the vents, it seemed, filling every room. My throat burned. I decided I wouldn't sleep. I drank coffee, paced around, and sat in the living room with a flashlight, the hallway in my sight. Around midnight, the scratching began. It was slow at first, like gentle dragging, but it built into a frantic scraping. I walked to the hallway, flashlight pointed at the floor. I could feel my heart in my throat. The noise was right in front of me, but I saw nothing. Then I heard a hiss, a low, wet sound that sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled backward, almost dropping the flashlight. I called out, demanding to know who was there. No answer, just more scraping. It sounded like it was circling me, even though I saw no movement. The smell got so strong I started coughing violently. My eyes stung. I could barely see straight. I fell to my knees, pressing my hand against the wall to steady myself. I forced myself to stand up, trying to breathe through my mouth. My chest felt tight, like I was suffocating. I sprinted back to my bedroom and slammed the door shut. I could still hear the scraping through the walls. It felt like it was all around me. That night I decided I had to leave. The fear was too overwhelming. I packed a bag with essentials, my laptop, some clothes, my wallet, and a few other items. I waited until morning. The house was quiet at dawn. The sulfur smell lingered, but it was weaker. The floor was a mess of scratches. My hallway looked like a battle had taken place. I could almost feel something watching me from a distance, but I didn't see anything. I opened the front door and stepped outside, breathing in fresh air for the first time in what felt like days. My muscles relaxed a bit, but my mind was still racing. I closed the door behind me, locked it, and stood on the porch. I listened for any sound inside, but the house stayed silent. I wanted to prove the existence of this thing, to show someone the video, the scratches, the flower marks. But I also wanted to keep my sanity. I walked to my car, threw my bag in the back seat, and got in. My hands shook as I started the engine. I glanced at the house one last time. My heart pounded. I felt an urge to go back and set up more cameras, maybe get more evidence. But I couldn't do it. I felt like the house was smothering me. I drove away, my mind full of images of those deep scratches and that horrible smell. I'm not sure what I'll do now. I'm not sure if I'll ever go back. But the memories stay with me, along with the smell that sometimes clings to my clothes. I can't explain it. All I know is that something was in there, dragging itself across my floors, leaving marks, never letting me see it fully. I still dream about it, even when I'm far away. And in my nightmares, it follows me down long, dark hallways, scraping its claws along the walls, waiting just out of sight. I need to get this off my chest. I haven't been sleeping right for weeks, and every night feels worse than the one before. There's something in my bedroom closet, and it's not just my imagination. It started with soft scratching noises around midnight. I tried ignoring it at first, thinking maybe it was a mouse or something outside in the wall, but it kept coming back. It wasn't loud, but it was steady. I could hear this faint scrape like fingernails on wood, and it got under my skin. I tried to calm myself by turning on the TV or scrolling through my phone, but that sound never stopped. I couldn't tell if it was in my head or if it was real. It felt too close to be a trick of the mind. The next day, I decided I'd had enough of losing sleep. I wanted to find the source and deal with it. I checked the closet in the morning. The first thing I noticed was that it felt colder inside than the rest of the room. I thought maybe there was a gap or a draft from outside. My bedroom is on the second floor, so I wasn't sure how a draft could get in, but I looked around anyway. My closet is one of those built-in ones, with a sliding door and a deeper area in the back for storage. It was mostly empty. I keep some shirts and pants in there, along with a few pairs of shoes. The walls inside looked normal at first glance. Plain white, no holes or anything. Then I noticed a small seam in the back panel, like there was a narrow door or a panel that wasn't part of the original design. I knocked on it. It sounded hollow. I wasn't sure what to do. The idea that there was some hidden compartment in my closet made me uneasy. I tried prying it with my fingertips, and to my surprise, the panel shifted a bit. It was thin, almost like a piece of plywood. I tugged on it, and it slid open enough for me to see a dark space behind it. It wasn't big, maybe a couple feet of additional depth, like someone had built a secret cubby or something. The air inside smelled stale, kind of like an old attic. There was a single metal rod running across, like a coat rack or a place to hang something. One single hanger dangled in the middle, made of wire, and it swayed a bit when I moved the panel. The hanger creaked softly as it moved. I felt a chill run through me, even though I wasn't sure why. It was just an empty space with a hanger, but something about it felt off. I decided I'd leave it alone for now. I closed the panel and slid the closet door shut. I went to work, trying not to think about it, but at night, the scratching came back. This time, it felt like it was coming directly from the closet door, not just the wall behind it. I could almost picture a hand inside, scraping its nails along the wood. I got up, walked to the closet, opened it, and tried to listen. Everything was silent once I opened it. I looked at the panel in the back, but I didn't see any movement. The hanger was there, still dangling, not moving on its own. I stood there, holding my breath, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, so I closed it again and went back to bed. I told myself it was just my nerves. The next couple of nights it got weirder. I started hearing a faint moaning sound. It wasn't loud, more like a muffled groan that came and went. Sometimes it was long, drawn-out breaths. Other times it sounded almost like someone crying. I tried to ignore it, but it's impossible to ignore noises like that. My heart pounded every time I heard it. I'd sit up in bed and stare at the closet door, half expecting something to come barreling out. But nothing ever did. The moaning would just stop. Then the scratching would start. Then silence. I'd stay awake until dawn, drenched in sweat, too scared to open that door again. I could feel my sanity slipping. It didn't help that I had to get up for work in the morning. I started feeling exhausted all day, jumping at small sounds, losing focus at my desk. I knew I had to figure out what was going on. One night I decided I was going to seal the closet door. I found a small padlock in the garage and installed a latch on the inside of the door frame. It wasn't easy, and I felt a little silly, but I was desperate for peace. I screwed in the latch, tested the lock a few times to make sure it was secure, and then closed the closet. I locked it. The relief I felt at that moment was immediate. I went to bed, certain I'd finally have a silent night. But around 1 in the morning, I heard the lock rattle. It was a soft click, click, click. My eyes flew open. I stared at the closet door, lit only by the streetlight glow coming through the window. The door handle was still. Then I heard the moaning again, but this time it was louder. It sounded like it was right behind the door, pressing against it. My pulse skyrocketed, and I froze. I couldn't move. I listened to the door rattle for what felt like minutes. Then I heard 3 distinct bangs from inside the closet, like something hitting the wood. My eyes watered from fear. I forced myself to stand up, even though my legs were shaking. I walked over, unlocked the padlock, and yanked the door open. The panel in the back was slightly ajar. That single wire hanger was swinging back and forth, clinking against the metal rod. I felt my stomach twist. There was no breeze, no draft, nothing that should have caused it to move like that. I leaned in, grabbed it, and held it still. Then I looked into the hidden space. It was dark, and I couldn't see very far. I clicked on the light on my phone and shone it inside. The walls were bare wood, unpainted, with some scratch marks near the top. It looked like someone had dragged a screwdriver or a knife against the wood. There were weird scribbles and shapes, mostly lines crossing each other, but nothing that formed words. I looked for any sign of animals, a rat's nest, droppings, something. I found nothing. That's when I heard a low groan directly behind me, like a breath against my ear. I jumped back, turned around, and swung my phone's light all over the closet. Nobody was there. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I grabbed the panel and slammed it shut again. I locked the closet, rushed to the kitchen, and sat there trembling for a while. I didn't go back to my bedroom until dawn. Even then, I only did it because I needed clothes for work. I told myself I'd check into a motel if things got worse, but I never did. I guess a part of me didn't want to abandon my own bedroom, but I was also scared to face the closet each night. I tried ignoring it, but the noises kept coming. The scratching grew louder, and sometimes it sounded like someone was dragging their nails across the inside of the door. Occasionally, I'd hear that hanger clanking as if it was hitting the rod repeatedly. The moans got clearer, almost like speech, but I couldn't make out words. It was more like a low, drawn-out groaning. Every time I heard it, my skin crawled. One evening, I decided to look behind the panel again, but this time I brought a flashlight. I waited until about 5 in the afternoon while it was still light outside so I wouldn't be as freaked out. I opened the closet, unlocked the panel, and shined the flashlight inside. The first thing I noticed was that the scribbles on the walls seemed deeper, like they'd been carved with more force. They looked fresher than they did a few days before. It was as if someone had been adding to them. I ran my hand over the marks. Some were shallow, some were deep grooves. They were random, crossing each other in chaotic patterns. The second thing I noticed was a weird smell, heavier than before. It reminded me of damp old wood mixed with something that made my nose sting. I shuddered. Then I saw the hanger move again, even though I wasn't touching it. It was a slow sway, side to side. I looked around, trying to see if there was a vent or some airflow. There was nothing. I reached out to stop it, and the metal felt cold, like it had been in a freezer. I stepped away and decided I'd had enough. I closed the panel, locked everything up, and went out for a drive to clear my head. I ended up eating dinner in my car, not wanting to return until it was really late. When I finally got back, I saw a faint light under my bedroom door, like the closet light was on, except I don't even have a light inside the closet. The overhead bulb for the closet burned out weeks ago, and I never replaced it. But there was a glow under the door, a soft flicker, almost like a candle. I swung the door open, and everything went dark in an instant. My bedroom lamp was off, and my closet door was still locked. There was no sign of any light source. The temperature in the room was different, though, like it dropped a few degrees. I felt goosebumps spreading on my arms. That night, I tried sleeping in the living room, but around 2 in the morning, I heard something dragging along the upstairs hallway. It was a slow scrape, like a heavy bag being pulled across the floor. My blood ran cold. I got up, flicked on every light I could, and walked to the foot of the stairs. The sound stopped. I stood there, heart racing, my mouth dry. I forced myself to climb the stairs and check the hallway. Nothing was there. The closet door was still shut, locked. Everything looked normal. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was standing right behind me, ready to grab me. I spun around a couple of times, shining my phone flashlight, but saw no one. I kept hearing my own breathing, shaky and uneven. I tried to go back to the couch, but I couldn't sleep. Around 4 in the morning, I heard a click from the bedroom. Then a low moan again. This time it sounded annoyed, like it was frustrated. That scared me more than anything else. It sounded aware, like it had an intention or a purpose. I waited for the sun to come up, and then I went back into the bedroom. I found scratches on the outside of the closet door. Tiny, hairline marks near the latch, like something had been trying to pry it open from the inside. The wood around the lock was chipped, and there were small splinters on the floor. I felt my stomach churn. I pictured some hand on the other side forcing its nails into the wood inch by inch. It made me shake. I didn't know whether to call someone. Who do you call for something like this? The cops? A handyman? An exorcist? It all sounded crazy. I ended up just standing there staring at that door. Over the next few days, every time I tried to sleep, I'd hear the moaning or the scratching, or I'd hear that hanger clanking. My eyes were always bloodshot, and I was snapping at people at work for no reason. I considered moving out or sleeping in a motel, but I kept telling myself, maybe it would stop if I just left it alone. Then one night, around midnight, I woke up to the sound of the closet door sliding open. It wasn't just a squeak, it was the distinct sound of the door on its track. My heart nearly burst. I sat up in bed, looked over, and saw the door was open about an inch, even though I knew I locked it. The padlock was still there, but the latch itself had been bent outward, like brute force had twisted it. I jumped up, grabbed my phone, and pointed its light at the gap. I heard a faint shuffle from inside, then a deep inhale, like something was breathing me in. I wanted to run, but instead I gripped the handle and slid the door open all the way. The panel in the back was wide open too. The hanger was on the floor now, bent out of shape. I could see fresh scratches along the inside of the panel, and the smell of that stale, damp air was stronger. I thought I saw a shape in the darkness, but it might have been a shadow. I took a step closer, shining my phone's light into that hidden space. That's when I heard a low, guttural groan again, right next to my ear. My hair stood on end and my skin prickled. I couldn't stand there another second. I slammed the panel shut, grabbed a chair, and jammed it under the closet door handle. Then I ran out of the room. I ended up trying to sleep in the car that night, but I couldn't stop shaking. Every so often I'd swear I heard a scratching sound coming from the house, like it was echoing through the walls. By the time morning came, I felt delirious. I walked back in, up the stairs, and opened the bedroom door. The closet door was still jammed with the chair, but there were more scratches on the outside. The wood looked shredded in places, like something had raked it repeatedly. My mind started to race. I wondered if I was losing it, or if there was some hidden creature that had been stuck in there for years, or if it was something else entirely. I haven't gotten rid of that closet yet. I've tried nailing the panel shut, piling boxes in front of it, even leaving the lights on all day. But every night around midnight I hear that first faint scratch, then the moan, then the hanger's clank, even though I've taken the hanger out and thrown it away. It sounds like it's still there. Sometimes I wake up and find the panel wide open again, with the nails pried loose. I don't know how much longer I can deal with this. I'm at my breaking point. I'm sleeping less than ever, and I'm jumpy all day. Every noise in the house sets me on edge. I've tried talking to a friend about it, but I left out the details. I only said I was having trouble sleeping because of strange noises. They suggested I see a doctor about insomnia. Part of me knows that won't help. It's not just insomnia. It's something in that hidden space. It's real. I've heard it breathe. I've heard it scrape the wood. I've felt its presence. This thing is trying to get out. Each night the noises get louder, like it's pushing harder against the door. The moans sound angrier, almost desperate. I feel like it's only a matter of time before it breaks through. I can't move. I can't really afford to break my lease, and the idea of leaving this thing behind for someone else to find doesn't feel right. I also don't know how to fight something I can't see. I don't even know what it is. All I know is that every night, I'm lying there, heart pounding, waiting. The second the sun rises, I feel a slight sense of relief, but that dread never goes away. It's just waiting in the back of my mind, reminding me that it'll come again when darkness sets in. I keep telling myself maybe tonight will be different. Maybe it'll stay quiet. But deep down I know it won't. The scratching will start, the moan will follow, and I'll be trapped in that cycle until I either go insane or face it directly. Part of me wants to tear the closet apart, rip out the panel and see whatever's there in the light of day. But I'm too scared of what I'd find. For now, I'm stuck, and I'm losing hope that it'll ever go away. I look at that door every single evening, my hand trembling on the doorknob when I lock it. My breath turns shallow as soon as the sky gets dark. I hear every creak, every shift in the house. And when I doze off, I'm jolted awake by that same scratch, that same moan, growing closer and closer like it's right by my bed, waiting for me to open my eyes. That's my life now, and I don't know how to escape it. I remember the first time I saw that face in the water. It was late in the afternoon, and I was walking around a quiet lake about a mile from my house. The sun was low, and there was nobody else around. I felt calm at first. Then I noticed a reflection on the lake's surface that didn't match what I was doing. I turned my head to the side, but the reflection stayed still. It had my features, but its expression wasn't mine. It was smiling in a way that made my stomach tighten. I looked around to see if anyone was nearby, but I was alone. When I glanced back at the water, the face was gone. That was the moment I realized something was off. I took a step closer to the lake and crouched down. I leaned in to get a better look at my own reflection. My face looked normal. No strange smile, no odd expression. I stared for a few seconds, waiting for something to happen. But the water just showed my usual features and the reflection of the sky above me. My hands were tense at my sides. I got back up, wiped some sweat from my forehead, and decided I should head home. The entire time I walked, I kept thinking about that grin I'd seen. It was too vivid to be my imagination. At home, I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. I tried to focus on a mundane task like cooking dinner, but I couldn't shake off the uneasiness I felt. After a while, I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water in front of me. I glanced at the surface. It looked normal. Then I picked it up, took a sip, and set it down again. The reflection was just the kitchen ceiling light, but I felt watched. I checked the window above the sink, wondering if there was some kind of reflection from outside. I saw only darkness and the outlines of trees in my yard. I tried to convince myself that I was tired and imagining things. I tried to let it go. The next day, I went back to the lake. I had this urge to see if that face would appear again. The path was muddy because it had rained in the early morning. My shoes squelched in the wet ground. The only sounds were distant birds and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. I reached the shore, looked around, and saw no one. The water was calm, with a slight ripple from the wind. I stayed there for a moment, breathing in the damp air. Then I looked down at the lake's surface. At first, I only saw my own reflection and the clouds. I shifted my weight from one leg to the other. My reflection moved with me. That felt normal. Then I heard a small splash behind me like a fish jumping. It startled me, so I turned for a second. When I looked back, the reflection wasn't aligned with my face. The eyes in the water were still pointed directly forward, and the mouth had that grin. My heart pounded, and I felt a wave of heat rush through my chest. I froze. I watched that reflection. It seemed to watch me back. Then after a moment, it turned its head very slightly to the left. My own head wasn't moving. I felt a cold sweat on my forehead, and my fingers twitched at my sides. I didn't speak. I just stared. When I stepped away from the water, the reflection disappeared. I stayed there another few minutes, unsure if I should keep looking or if I should leave. I kept glancing at the lake, hoping it was all in my mind. But I saw no sign of that other face again. I felt my pulse throb in my temples. I could barely swallow. I eventually walked away, wiping my hands on my jeans to get rid of the nervous sweat. My thoughts were everywhere, but I tried to keep them in check. As I left, I decided to avoid the lake for a while. A week passed without me going near any large body of water. I tried to live normally. I went to the grocery store, I did some work from home, and I even visited a friend one night, though I avoided drinking anything that would make me need water too much. My mind kept drifting back to that face, but I told myself it was just some weird trick of my imagination. Maybe I was stressed. Maybe I saw my reflection in a strange way. That sense of relief disappeared one night when I was brushing my teeth. I turned the faucet on to rinse my mouth, and I saw something move in the water in the sink. It looked like a pair of eyes peering at me, eyes that weren't mine. My gut clenched. I jerked my head away. I tried to calm myself, telling myself I was just tired. But when I leaned in again, I saw nothing but the swirling water going down the drain. My hand shook a little when I turned the faucet off. I tried to sleep, but I kept waking up, thinking I heard water dripping. I kept picturing that face with the grin. I flipped on the light in my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my eyes. I felt so tense my shoulders ached. My mouth was dry, but I was afraid to drink any water. I sat there, in the dim light, listening to my own breathing. After about an hour, I managed to lie down, though I didn't get much rest. A couple of days later, I decided to face my fear and go back to the lake. I couldn't stand the idea of being scared of any surface of water. I thought if I confronted it, maybe I'd see nothing and prove to myself that it was all nonsense. So I walked down the same path, stepping around muddy patches and trying to maintain a normal pace. My chest felt tight and I was breathing faster than usual. When I arrived, I noticed the lake was still. The weather was pretty clear, with some light clouds overhead. The water had a dark green color near the shore, and I saw small ripples here and there. I moved closer. I saw my reflection come into view. I focused on the details: my eyebrows, my hair, my nose. Everything seemed correct. Then I saw the reflection's mouth curling up into that smile, even though my lips were pressed together. My knees felt weak. I almost stumbled backward. I stared at the reflection. Its eyes were on me. I felt a heavy pressure in my chest, like my body was telling me to run, but my mind was stuck. I leaned in and I opened my mouth to speak. My voice came out shaky. "What do you want?" I asked. The face didn't respond. It kept smiling. Its lips curled in a slow motion as if it was savoring the moment. I waited, hoping for a voice, for some reaction, but I only heard the wind and my own heartbeat. I knelt down, letting my knee press into the damp ground. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Can you hear me?" Silence. The reflection just stared. Then, with a slow tilt of the head, it raised its eyebrows. My heart hammered so hard I thought my chest might burst. I couldn't move my arms or legs for a few seconds. I only managed to stand up when a twig snapped somewhere behind me, snapping me out of my trance. I turned around fast. There was no one there, just the wind in the trees. When I looked back to the water, the face was gone. My reflection was normal again. I left the lake in a rush. My shoes kicked up dirt as I practically jogged back to the main road. My mind was racing with questions I didn't want to answer. Was it a hallucination? Some trick of the water? But the expression I saw was too vivid. It felt real. The walk home felt like it took forever. I kept avoiding puddles. I didn't want to see any reflection. When I got back to my house, I went straight to the bathroom. I kept the lights off. I didn't want to see my face in the mirror above the sink. I turned on the shower, careful not to look at the water. I stood under it, feeling the hot water run down my neck. I closed my eyes most of the time. I couldn't help but feel paranoid that I'd see that face in the droplets on the shower curtain or at my feet. My heart was beating fast the entire time. I rinsed off and got out quickly, grabbing a towel without looking at the mirror. For the next few days, I avoided all water surfaces as much as possible. I left my dishes in the sink longer than I normally would. I used a bottle for drinking water and closed my eyes whenever I poured it. I started to feel worn down. I was jumpy. I couldn't concentrate on anything, and I dreaded washing my hands. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of movement in the faucet water, but I tried to ignore it. My nights were filled with restless sleep. I kept hearing soft dripping noises in my dreams. Then something new happened. I woke up one morning, thirsty, and reached for the bottle of water by my bed. It had a clear plastic surface. When I lifted it, I thought I saw that same grin somewhere inside the bottle. I almost dropped it. I was so startled I had to set it down carefully on my bedside table. Then I just stared at it, my stomach churning. The water inside looked normal. The plastic had a few scratches from being tossed around. I saw only the faint reflection of my lamp, but my heart kept hammering. I couldn't handle that constant fear anymore. I decided to confront the face once more, this time with a plan. I bought a cheap handheld mirror and a flashlight. My idea was to go to the lake at night, shine the flashlight into the water, and see if I could catch that face off guard. I wasn't entirely rational at that point. I just knew I had to do something. My nerves were frayed, and I was desperate for any sense of control. That evening, I forced myself to walk the same path, flashlight in one hand, mirror in the other. The sky was dark, and the moon was only a thin crescent. The trees around me formed black shapes that swayed in the wind. My heart pounded so hard it almost hurt. I reached the lake and shone the flashlight at the surface. At first, the light just reflected back. I saw my own face in the water, looking pale and sweaty. I waited, shining the beam in slow arcs. There was a faint rustling behind me, but I refused to let it distract me. Suddenly, I saw a slight shift in my reflection's expression. The eyes narrowed, and the corners of the mouth lifted. I aimed the flashlight right at it. my hand trembling. I brought the mirror down to see if I could catch another angle of the water's surface. I tilted it to reflect the lake in the mirror. The face stared back at me from the mirror's reflection. It had that same unsettling grin, but now it seemed sharper. Its mouth opened a little, like it was breathing. My chest felt tight. I could feel sweat trickling down my back. I stood there holding the mirror, staring at that face. It seemed to be waiting for something. My throat felt dry, and I had the urge to speak again. "Why are you following me?" I asked, my voice unsteady. The face in the mirror didn't move its lips, but I felt a strange vibration in my chest, like a muffled hum. I couldn't explain it. I stayed there for several seconds, waiting for a reply that never came. Then I lowered the mirror. The reflection was still in the lake, shining back at me under the flashlight beam. I realized my hands were shaking so much that the light wobbled across the water. I braced my arm to steady it. The face's grin grew wider, showing too many teeth. My stomach churned. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned off the flashlight and took a few steps back from the shore. My breathing was shallow, and I felt lightheaded. In the darkness, I heard the water ripple. I couldn't see anything. My skin prickled, and I held my breath. I was terrified that the face would appear right next to me. I fumbled with the flashlight switch, but I was too scared to turn it on again. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping on a root. After a moment of standing there, I forced myself to walk away. I moved carefully, afraid of stepping into any puddles. I kept thinking something would grab me from behind. My pulse pounded in my ears. When I got home, I locked all the doors and turned off every light. I sat in my living room feeling the dryness in my mouth, but I refused to get a glass of water. I stayed there for a long time, my thoughts spinning. I thought about moving somewhere inland, far from any large body of water, but then I remembered water is everywhere. Even a small cup could hold that reflection. I realized I couldn't escape it by running. That's where I am now. I've blocked the bathroom mirror with a towel. I keep my drinking water in opaque containers. I only shower when I absolutely have to, and I keep my eyes shut the whole time. I still catch glimpses, though. In the condensation on a window, in a stray puddle after rain, in the glass at a restaurant if I'm careless. The face is still there, waiting. It doesn't speak. It just stares with that grin. I live each day knowing it's lurking in any reflective surface of water. I jump at small sounds. I avoid washing my hands until it's absolutely necessary, and I keep the lights off in the bathroom. Part of me wonders if I should try to challenge it again, maybe find out what it wants. But another part of me knows I might never get a straight answer. All I know is that I can't erase what I've seen. I can't unsee that grin. I can't pretend it never happened. So I keep watch, hoping it'll get bored or vanish on its own. But every time I see my reflection in water, I feel that uneasy grip on my chest again. That's my life now, dealing with this silent presence that shows up wherever there's a bit of water. I don't know if it wants something or if it's just there to torment me. I only know that I see it and that it's always watching. I feel it behind my eyelids when I try to sleep. I sense it in every drop of water that collects in the sink. I live in a constant state of tension, never fully relaxed, never free. It's like I'm sharing my existence with something that doesn't belong in this world. It's in my reflection, but it isn't me. And no matter how hard I try, I can't make it go away. So that's everything I can say about this. I don't have a neat conclusion or a happy ending. I don't have proof that it's real to anyone else. But I know what I've seen. I know what I keep seeing. I've accepted that there's no easy escape from this presence. It's in the water, and water is everywhere. I can't avoid it forever. So I stay on guard, watching every ripple, every little splash, and every subtle shimmer that catches my eye. That's how I live now. I don't know if anything will change, but I do know I won't ignore it again. I never thought my own shadow could scare me. I'm sitting here in this old room, surrounded by the smell of dust and damp wood. My palms won't stop sweating. and I keep glancing at the walls, wondering if it's going to happen again. I'm going to describe everything that led me to this moment because I don't know how much longer I can stay here. This all started when I moved into a large shared house about 2 weeks ago. I wanted to save money, so I rented a simple room on the second floor. I had no real expectations. I just needed a bed, a desk, and some quiet at night. On my first day, I noticed the size of the house right away. It has an old wooden staircase, a few long hallways, and a bunch of rooms rented to different people. Most of them keep to themselves. I haven't spoken to many of the tenants. I see them in the kitchen sometimes, but nobody seems eager to chat. That was fine with me. I wanted a quiet place to focus on work. I set up my things in my room. The wallpaper had some peeling edges. The window looked out onto the backyard, which is mostly just a patch of overgrown grass. My door has a simple lock, and there's a small closet with a creaky door. At first, I didn't notice anything weird. I just unpacked my clothes, set my laptop on the desk, and got comfortable. The first night, I heard regular old house noises, pipes banging, floorboards groaning under someone's footsteps, and distant voices. The walls aren't thick, but I'm used to city noise, so it didn't bother me. The second night, I decided to work late on some spreadsheets. I turned off the overhead light and used a small lamp near my desk. I found the overhead light too bright, and I like to work in a dim environment. At some point, I got up to stretch. The lamp was behind me, so my shadow appeared on the wall. It moved as I moved, nothing unusual. I went to the bathroom, came back, and then turned the lamp off. The room was dark. I got ready to sleep. That was when I spotted something on the wall. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It looked like a shadow, shaped like me, on the wall. But the lamp was off, and the hallway light was too faint. There was no direct beam to create a defined silhouette. I stood still, and my shape on the wall stood there too. It didn't fade or shift. I felt my chest tighten. I blinked. Then I stepped back toward the window. The shape stayed on the wall. It didn't follow me. It remained near the spot where I had been standing. I was tired, so I muttered something to myself about illusions. I tried switching the lamp on again. The normal shadow reappeared where I expected it to be, blending with that darker shape. I turned the lamp off once more, and there it was again, a clear outline of my body on the wall, not moving. I felt uneasy, but I figured I just needed sleep. I lay in bed, facing the wall so I wouldn't see it. After a while, I dozed off. The next morning, the wall was normal. There was no trace of anything. I almost laughed it off. I went to work, ate dinner out, and came back late. I went straight to my room. Everything was quiet. My phone battery was dead, and I realized I'd left my charger at work. I sat in bed, bored. The overhead light hurt my eyes, so I switched it off again. I sat there in darkness. Then I caught a glimpse of movement to my left. It was the same silhouette. I saw it shifting across the wall. This time I knew something was wrong because there was no light source. I wasn't casting any shadow on my own. Yet I saw my shape on the wall, about 6 feet away from me. My heart started pounding. My throat felt dry. I got up and stepped toward it. The outline moved a few inches, as if adjusting itself, but it didn't match my movements. It looked like my body shape, but it was acting on its own. I whispered something like, "What the hell are you?" I know that sounds stupid, talking to a shadow, but I had no idea how else to react. It didn't respond, obviously, but it raised its arm. It was still a shadow on the wall, but I could see a distinct arm shape pointing toward a corner of the room near the closet. There's a small section of the floor there that's covered by a loose board. I stared at that corner for a moment. The shadow kept pointing. I stepped closer to the corner. The floor creaked. My stomach felt tight. I didn't want to open that loose board, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that I had to see what was underneath. I gently lifted the board. I coughed from the dust. Beneath it, there was a small gap with a few random nails, but I also saw something else. There was a symbol carved into the wood underneath. It looked like a simple circle with a line through it, but it had tiny marks around the edges. I reached in and touched the carving. The wood felt cold. I rubbed off some dust. My fingers felt something jagged. It was definitely carved by hand. I heard a low sound like a quiet rumble. I turned around. The shadow was still on the wall, arm lowered now. It looked like it was waiting, but it had no face, no features, just the shape of my body. I felt my pulse racing. I put the board back in place and stood up. The shadow moved across the wall, sliding slowly. It raised its other arm. This time, it pointed at the far side of the room near the window. The wallpaper there is old and peeling, so I walked over, not sure why I was obeying it. I peeled back a corner. The paper tore easily. Underneath, the plaster looked damaged. I spotted another symbol scratched into the surface. It was the same circle with a line, only bigger. I used my fingernail to dig around the edges. I saw more of those tiny marks around the circle. They were arranged in a pattern I couldn't figure out. The shadow on the wall seemed to tremble a little, like it was pleased or excited. I felt a chill on my neck. I was drenched in sweat and my hands were shaking. I pressed my ear to the wall. I don't know what I expected to hear, but everything was silent. I stepped back and watched the shadow. It lowered its arm again, then it placed both hands on its hips like it was waiting. I took a few deep breaths. I couldn't believe what was happening. My own shadow was showing me hidden carvings. There was no reason or logic to any of this. I slowly reached for the lamp. I was sure if I turned it on, the shadow would vanish. I flipped the switch. The moment the light filled the room, the strange silhouette disappeared, replaced by my normal shadow on the floor and wall, which matched my position and movements. I stood there, panting. After a minute, I turned the lamp off again. The wall was empty. Nothing else showed up. It took me a while to calm down enough to sleep, but eventually exhaustion hit me and I passed out. The next few days were tense. During the daytime, I acted normal. I saw some other tenants in the hallway. One or two of them said hi, but I didn't mention anything about the shadow. I stayed late at work, afraid of coming back to the dark room, but I had no other place to go. The rent was cheap, and I didn't have enough savings to move again right away. So I returned each night, telling myself I would just keep the light on until I fell asleep. That worked for a day or two. Then one night I woke up around 2 a.m. I had apparently turned off the lamp in my sleep. My room was dark. My eyes adjusted. I saw that silhouette again over by the door. My stomach flipped. I sat up and it moved. It raised its arm, pointing again. I realized my mouth was dry, so I swallowed. I walked where it directed me, which was the wall near my desk. There's a little portion of the baseboard that's detached from the wall. I knelt down, pried it open, and found another carving. This one was bigger, with more lines and strange shapes around the main circle. I ran my hand over it. The wood felt rough and a splinter stuck into my palm. I winced. I heard that same low rumble, like a quiet growl behind me. It made my scalp prickle. I stood and turned around. The shadow was closer to me. It moved across the wall without any light source. I could smell something stale in the room, like old wood or wet earth, but stronger than before. I kept backing up. My heart felt like it would leap out of my chest. I don't know why I kept following its instructions. Maybe I was curious, or maybe I thought ignoring it would make things worse. Part of me considered packing up and leaving, but I can't afford another place right now. Also, a small part of me wanted to find out what else was hidden. I know that sounds crazy. The tension in my chest grew each time the shadow appeared, but I couldn't help it. I had to see where it would lead me. A few nights later, I was lying in bed trying to sleep. Around midnight, I heard a soft knock on my door. I got up and opened it, but no one was there. The hallway was dark. I peeked out. Nothing. I closed the door, locked it, and turned around. The shadow was on the wall again. It moved in a way I hadn't seen before. It blended into the corner, then slid across the ceiling. I felt a wave of nausea. I turned on my phone flashlight, shining it at the wall. The shadow still remained, ignoring the light. It pointed at a spot near the closet. This time I felt a jolt of panic. I didn't want to follow it, but I felt compelled. I opened the closet door. I moved aside my few jackets and shoes. The shadow was pointing at a small panel in the back. I placed my hand against it, pushed, and it swung open. There was a tiny space behind the closet. Dust fell on my hand and a spider skittered away. Inside that space, I found another carved symbol, larger, deeper, with several circles connected by lines. The grooves looked worn, like they'd been there for years. I touched the carving and the shadow seemed to merge with it. Its silhouette stretched across the panel and I heard a deeper rumbling sound. It vibrated in my ears. I stumbled back, coughing. My knees felt weak. My mind was spinning. I closed the panel and slammed the closet door. I flicked on the overhead light. The shadow vanished again, but I still felt shaky. My breath came in short gasps. I sat on my bed, trying to steady myself. I could still feel that vibration in my chest. Over the next hour, I paced the room. I looked at each spot where I'd found these symbols. I tried to piece them together. I saw small cuts in the wood, small lines that connected from one symbol to the next, as if there was some pattern running through the walls and floor. My gut churned. I had no idea what these inscriptions meant, and I was terrified of what might happen if I kept discovering them. The shadow obviously wanted me to keep going. Each time I found another symbol, it seemed to merge with it, producing that low growl. I didn't know if it was in pain or if it was excited. I tried not to think about that. I just wanted to sleep. But I couldn't. Now, I'm sitting here, recalling what happened 3 nights ago when I last saw the shadow. That night it pointed toward the hallway door, as if telling me to leave my room. I unlocked the door, stepped into the hallway, and saw it on the wall again. It moved toward the far end of the corridor. I followed, my legs trembling. I was worried someone else would come out of their room and see me creeping around in the dark. But nobody did. I walked slowly, my feet quiet on the old floorboards. The shadow led me to a small closet in the hallway where the cleaning supplies are kept. I opened it. There was a shelf with a few bottles of detergent. Then I noticed a hatch in the ceiling above the shelf. It had a small metal ring. I had no idea where it led. I stood on the shelf carefully, pulled the ring, and the hatch opened. Dust fell on my face. I coughed, wiping my eyes. I shined my phone flashlight inside. There was a cramped crawl space up there. I saw a few exposed beams. The shadow's silhouette kept moving across the closet wall, urging me to climb up. I felt dizzy with fear. My heart hammered. I nearly turned around. But something inside me said I was already too deep. I hoisted myself up into the crawl space. My back scraped against a beam. I shone my flashlight in front of me. On one of the joists, there was another symbol carved into the wood, bigger than any I'd seen before. This one had 3 concentric circles with lines branching out like spokes on a wheel. I touched it. The wood felt damp. My fingers sank into the grooves, and the shadow crept across the opening behind me. That rumbling sound got louder. I felt it in my teeth. It pulsed, then faded. I climbed back down, shaking. I hurried to my room, locked the door, and sat on my bed. My skin was icy. My breath came in quick bursts. I kept the overhead light on all night. The next morning, I noticed my eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I went to work trying to focus on normal tasks, but my mind kept going back to those carvings and that independent shadow. Now it's late again. I'm in my room, the lamp on. I'm not sure if I want to see the shadow. Part of me wants to uncover more symbols, to piece them together. But I'm scared. I'm scared that the shadow will demand more, that it will lead me deeper into this house, that it will keep showing me those strange inscriptions until something else happens. I don't know what that could be. I don't want to find out. But I keep looking over my shoulder at the walls. The darkness in the corners seems thicker. I can almost feel the shadow lurking, ready to appear. My body is tense. My heart is pounding. I'm writing this because I don't know if I'll leave tomorrow or if I'll stay. I can still smell that damp, stale odor. It's like it's seeping out of the floorboards. My shoulders ache. My head is throbbing and my eyes burn from staring at every corner. I keep expecting that shape to slide across the wall again. My mind is racing, trying to decide what to do. I might pack up what little I have and go to a motel. Then again, I'm short on money and I hate admitting that I'm too afraid to stay. I'm also worried that if I run away, I'll always wonder what those symbols meant. The shadow clearly wanted me to see them. But why? I don't have answers. All I know is that this feels dangerous. My body is telling me to run. My legs are shaking just thinking about it. But my hands are itching to pry up more floorboards and check behind more wallpaper. I can't shake that impulse. Something about those carvings feels unfinished, like there's a bigger pattern hidden throughout the house. Right now, I'm sitting on my bed, writing all of this down. The hallway outside is quiet. The rest of the tenants must be asleep or out. I keep glancing at the door, expecting to see my shadow slip underneath it. My heart jumps at every creak in the floor or rustle of the wind outside. I've never felt this kind of tension in my body, like my muscles are ready to snap. I'm breathing faster, trying to calm myself. I can't ignore the possibility that the shadow could appear at any second. It's guiding me towards something, but I don't want to see it tonight. I need to rest. My eyes sting with exhaustion. My chest feels tight. I'm rubbing my temples, trying to get rid of a growing headache. I can't handle another confrontation right now. I've locked the door, turned on every light in the room, and closed the curtains. That shadow should have no reason to appear. There's no darkness here, but my gut tells me that normal logic doesn't matter to it. If I stay another night, I might see more carvings. I might find that the entire house is covered with them. I might see the shadow do something worse than just point. It might try to lead me somewhere else in the house, maybe to the basement or the attic. I'm terrified of what I'll find if I follow it again. My thoughts are racing in circles. I'm sweating, even though the room is cool. I don't know how to end this story because I'm living it right now. This is the truth as I know it. There's a shadow here that looks like me but moves on its own. It shows me hidden symbols carved into the walls and floors of this old house. It merges with them, making a rumbling sound. I feel like it's pushing me toward a final discovery, but I don't know what that will be. I'm tired, my mind is scattered, and I'm afraid. I want to leave, but I also feel compelled to stay. I can't shake the idea that if I go, the shadow will follow me wherever I end up. So I'm left with two choices: follow it again and learn more, or pack up my stuff in the middle of the night and find somewhere else to sleep. Right now, I'm leaning toward leaving, but the moment I stand up to pack, I feel a pang of doubt. My muscles tighten and I pause. I keep looking at the wall, waiting for the shadow to show itself and point to another hidden symbol. My hands are shaking, and my heart is pounding. My breath comes in short bursts. I don't know what I'll decide in the next hour, but I know I can't stay frozen like this forever. If I see that shadow again, I have to do something. Either I confront it one last time or I run. I'm still not sure which one I'll choose. I heard the tapping first. It echoed in short bursts against the concrete, and it came from somewhere behind one of the pillars. I froze for a second because it didn't sound random. It sounded steady, like a pattern someone was making on purpose. I was in that parking garage alone, and it was after midnight. I hadn't seen a single person since I parked my car. My pulse jumped right away. My eyes darted around, searching for any movement or any sign of another person. I saw nothing but rows of cement columns and a few scattered cars with tinted windows. Everything else looked still. The tapping stopped for a moment, then started again, louder this time, as if it was following me. I gripped my phone tight in my hand and walked slowly, keeping my steps as quiet as I could. I thought maybe some maintenance worker was down there, or maybe some random person was messing around. The place was mostly empty, but there was always a possibility that someone else had parked in a hidden corner. The tapping moved from one column to the next. I tried to pinpoint the source. The sound bounced along the concrete walls, so it was hard to locate it. My stomach churned with a sense of dread. I told myself to keep calm, so I inhaled and exhaled slowly. My breathing felt loud in my ears. I stepped around a column and aimed my phone's flashlight at the wall. I saw nothing. I looked up at the ceiling. I saw pipes, dim overhead lights, and some cables, but nothing that could make that knocking noise on its own. The air smelled like engine oil and damp concrete. It stuck in my nostrils and reminded me of old parking garages from my childhood, but I pushed that memory out of my head. I didn't want to think about anything except figuring out what was going on right then. I called out, "Hello? Is someone here?" My voice bounced off the walls. I heard it come back at me, but nobody answered. The tapping paused for a few seconds, and then it started again on the other side of the garage. I turned quickly and felt a spike of adrenaline in my chest. I followed the sound. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floor, and every step made me feel more certain that I wasn't alone. Yet, I saw no sign of a person. No movement, no shoes, no silhouette other than mine. The entire place felt wrong, and that sense of being observed clung to me. As I got closer to the next row of columns, I noticed a faint shadow near the far end. It was tall, stretched out along the ground, like it belonged to someone standing at the edge of the light. I raised my phone and aimed the flashlight toward it, but the shadow faded. My heart raced. I rushed forward, hoping to catch whoever was there, but when I got to that spot, there was nobody. My shoes scraped on the floor, and I looked in every direction. Nothing. My reflection in the side mirror of a nearby car caught my eye. My face looked pale, and I could see a slight tremor in my hand. I told myself it was just my imagination, or maybe a trick of the dim light. Still, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was toying with me. I kept walking, not sure what else to do. I wanted to find a stairwell or an elevator to get out of there, but I also felt some urge to figure out what was happening. A small part of me wanted to run right to my car, turn on the engine, and drive away. But I also felt an odd need to confront this thing or person or whatever it was. My chest felt tight. The only sounds I heard were my footsteps and the distant hum of the ventilation system. Then, out of nowhere, the tapping started again, this time right behind me. I turned around so fast that I almost lost my balance. My phone's flashlight beam trembled against the wall. I expected to see someone there, but I saw only a pillar and some empty space. I stepped backward, feeling tension build in my shoulders. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a pipe or some mechanical system, but it didn't sound like that. It sounded too deliberate, too rhythmic. I decided to move toward the center of the garage where there were more lights. As I walked, I kept glancing around. My neck felt stiff from turning so much. My stomach was churning and I could feel sweat forming on my back. When I reached the central area, the lights were brighter, but that only showed me more empty spaces and more columns. I glanced at the mirrors on the walls. Some garages have those curved mirrors so drivers can see around corners. My reflection looked off somehow. I lifted my arm slowly and the reflection followed, but there was a slight delay, like a 1-second lag. I blinked hard and raised my arm again. I saw a quick lag in the mirror. That sent a chill through my entire body. I stepped closer to the mirror and stared at myself. My face looked tense, my eyes wide. I waved both hands. The reflection responded, but it was just a fraction of a second too late. I took a step back, and the reflection repeated my move a moment after. It felt unnatural. I touched the mirror with my fingertips. It felt cold and smooth, just like glass. There was no distortion, except for that slight delay. I pulled my hand away, and I felt like I was going to throw up. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I knew mirrors weren't supposed to do that. I looked around again, hoping to see if maybe it was a glitch in the lighting or some weird effect, but it didn't feel like an illusion. It felt real and impossible. My reflection stood there, staring back even when I wasn't doing the exact same expression. I swear I saw its eyebrows furrow slightly, even though I hadn't changed my expression yet. I backed away and bumped into a cement pillar. The tapping noise started again, this time from above. I pointed my flashlight up, but I saw no catwalk, no second floor at that exact spot, nothing that explained the sound. I breathed through my mouth, trying to calm down. My heart hammered in my chest and my palms felt clammy. Every muscle in my body felt tense. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I started moving through the rows of parked cars, looking for a working elevator or a stairwell door that wasn't locked. I passed by a few vehicles covered in dust. A single exit sign glowed at the far end, but it looked too far away. As I walked, I heard the tapping again, this time echoing off to my left. It was getting closer. My legs felt heavy. I picked up the pace, but I kept looking back, checking if something was following me. I turned a corner and saw more mirrors. I tried not to look at them, but my eyes drifted there anyway. I saw my reflection again. It stood still even when I was moving. I gasped and stepped away. The reflection finally moved a moment later. It turned its head and looked at me. My hair stood on end. I muttered curses under my breath. I felt trapped, even though I technically knew I could just run out of that garage. I felt as if the air around me had thickened, making it tough to breathe. My phone's battery icon glowed red, which sent a jolt of panic through me. I needed light, and I needed to know what time it was. I considered calling someone, but then I remembered that I hadn't seen any signal bars when I checked earlier. The place was underground, and the reception must have been bad. My phone could die at any second. The tapping happened again, this time from a pillar right next to me. I spun around and looked at it. I banged the side of my fist against the concrete. It felt solid and unmoving, but I pounded it again, frustrated. Then I heard 3 sharp knocks from behind the pillar, followed by a shuffle. I whipped around, shining my light there. No one. My breathing got faster, and my throat felt dry. I decided to try a different approach. I started talking. "Hey, who are you? What do you want?" I got no answer, just more taps, spaced out like a response. It felt like something was toying with me. I smelled gasoline in the air, a strong whiff that made my eyes sting. I heard a screech behind me, like metal dragging on the floor. I rushed around the row of cars to see if something or someone was there. I spotted an old shopping cart leaning against a concrete wall. The wheels looked rusty, and it was tilted sideways. I didn't remember seeing it before. The handle had a smear of what looked like grease. I walked up to it. It was still vibrating, as if it had just been pushed. I looked around for signs of movement. Nothing. My mouth felt dry, and I swallowed hard. The cart stopped shaking. All the while, I sensed that presence behind me, or above me, or just out of sight. My skin felt prickly. The hairs on my arms stood on end. I wanted to run, but a strange curiosity kept me there. I felt compelled to see more, to figure out if I was losing my mind or if something truly unnatural was happening. I told myself I'd go to the next set of mirrors and check my reflection again. If it still did that delayed movement, then I'd get out of there for good. I walked in short, cautious steps, sweeping my flashlight side to side. My breath hitched every time I thought I saw a flicker of motion. The pillars cast long shadows, and I couldn't shake the idea that one of them might hide a living shape. At one point, I stopped and leaned against a car to catch my breath. I felt my heart pounding inside my rib cage, and my mouth tasted bitter. I wondered if I was having a panic attack. I clenched my fists and forced myself to keep going. I reached another mirror near the security booth. The glass looked grimy, but I could still see my face. I lifted my arm, and the reflection lagged again. I stared at it for a few seconds, then, with no delay, my reflection smiled, even though I hadn't smiled. My spine tingled. I covered my mouth with my hand. My reflection's smile vanished after a second, following my move in a weird, off-sync way. My eyes burned with tears for a moment, but I pushed them back. I wiped my forehead with my sleeve, then looked behind me to see if anything was there. No one stood there. I noticed a closed door near the corner of the garage. It said, "Maintenance authorized personnel only." I tried the handle. It turned, but the door felt stuck. I pressed my shoulder against it and felt it shift a bit. The hinges squeaked, and I managed to open it about halfway. A strong odor of dampness and mold rushed out. Inside, I saw a narrow hallway with flickering overhead lights. I hesitated, but I thought maybe I'd find a stairway or a back exit. I slipped through the gap and closed the door behind me. The corridor was cramped with pipes running along the ceiling. My footsteps echoed on the tiled floor. The tapping followed me, more faint now, as if it was traveling through the walls. Halfway down this hallway, I heard a thump behind me. I turned around and saw nothing. The door was still closed. I moved forward, reaching a small intersection that branched left and right. I chose the left side because I saw a sign that said exit. I passed a row of metal lockers. One of them creaked open on its own. I jumped back. I turned my light on it. There was no one there. I kicked the locker door shut, and it banged loudly. My nerves were shot. My arms and legs were shaking, and I felt sweat trickle down my temples. Finally, I reached a thick metal door that led to a stairwell. It was locked. I jiggled the handle a few times, but it wouldn't budge. I slammed my fist against it and shouted in frustration. Then I heard the tapping again, right in front of me, but there was nowhere for someone to hide. My phone's flashlight flickered. The battery was about to die. My thoughts raced. I considered going back the way I came, but I felt pinned down by dread. My breath came in short bursts, and I tried to calm myself by focusing on the immediate goal. Find an exit or a place with cell service. I turned around and started walking back to the parking area. Every noise seemed amplified in my ears. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The tapping sounded off to my left, then to my right, then above me. I was sure I saw a shadow dart across the corner of my vision, but whenever I whipped my head around, there was no one. My flashlight blinked out. I cursed under my breath. Now I only had the faint ceiling lights and the emergency lamps to guide me. I made it back to the door leading into the main parking level. I pushed it open and stepped out. The tapping had stopped. The silence felt just as unnerving. My eyes took a moment to adjust to the dimmer lighting. I took a few steps in, and that's when I noticed my reflection in a mirror near the exit ramp. It looked like me, but it stood still, not matching my movement. My breath caught in my throat. I lifted my hand to wave at it, and it stared back, just frozen. Then a moment later, it lifted its hand. We weren't in sync. It mimicked me, but it was always behind. I felt dizzy, my chest felt tight, and my neck muscles ached. I heard movement to my right. I turned and saw the tall shadow figure at the far end of the garage. It seemed to flicker in place. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to walk toward it. I wanted to see if it was a person. I moved carefully, my eyes locked on that shape. As I got closer, I realized there was no one there. It vanished. I ran the last few steps, panting. I felt the cold air against my damp skin. I stood there scanning the entire area. Nothing. Only the smell of gasoline and concrete dust. That was it. I decided I was done. My whole body shook, and my mind felt scrambled. I headed straight for the direction I remembered leaving my car. My phone was almost dead, but I used its faint light to see the row numbers painted on the columns. Each step felt heavier, and I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see something jump out at me. The taps didn't start again, but I felt that strange energy in the air, like the silence was just waiting to break. When I spotted my car, relief washed over me. I fumbled in my pocket for the keys. My hands were slippery with sweat. I pressed the button to unlock the doors, and the car's headlights blinked. I climbed in, slammed the door, and locked it. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard. The air smelled stuffy inside, but at least I felt a bit safer. I glanced at my rearview mirror. My reflection met my eyes. This time, it was in sync, or at least it seemed to be. I started the engine, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't dare to look at any other mirrors in that place. I kept my eyes straight ahead as I drove up the ramp, out of the underground levels. I left that place feeling drained. My muscles ached and my head pounded with the pressure of trying to figure out what I had just experienced. I drove in silence, my mind racing. But one thing felt certain. Whatever was happening down there wasn't normal, and it felt like it wanted me to stay, to keep searching. Part of me regretted not pushing further. Another part of me felt relief that I managed to get out without losing my sanity. I don't know if I'll ever go back. I might have to someday, but right now, I just want to stay as far away as possible from that tapping, that moving shadow, and that reflection that didn't follow my movements. I still feel like something attached itself to me down there. Even now, whenever I pass by any reflective surface, I glance at my reflection, checking if it's matching my moves in real time. So far, it has. But in the back of my mind, I keep thinking about those taps, that shadow, and the weird delay. And I wonder if I ever really left it behind.